Explore security metrics in Microsoft 365. This learning path examines the threat vectors and data breaches organizations face today in their cybersecurity landscape, and the wide range of security solutions that Microsoft 365 provides to combat those threats. This learning path helps prepare you for exam MS-101, Microsoft 365 Mobility and Security. Prerequisites. Students should have completed a role-based administrator collection such as messaging, teamwork, security, and compliance, or collaboration. Students should have a proficient understanding of DNS and basic functional experience with Microsoft 365 services. Students must have a proficient understanding of general IT practices. Examine threat vectors and data breaches. This module examines the types of threat vectors and their potential outcomes that organizations must deal with on a daily basis, and how users can enable hackers to access targets by unwittingly executing malicious content. Learning objectives. By the end of this module, you will be able to describe techniques hackers use to compromise user accounts through email. Describe techniques hackers use to gain control over resources. Describe techniques hackers use to compromise data. Mitigate an account breach. Prevent an elevation of privilege attack. Prevent data exfiltration, data deletion, and data spillage. Introduction. A threat vector is a path or means by which a hacker, or threat actor, can gain access to a target. The target can be anything of value to the hacker. Common targets include computers and servers, usernames and passwords, known as account credentials, personal information, financial information, an organization's plans for a new marketing campaign. In this module, you'll examine the types of threats vectors and their potential outcomes that organizations must deal with each day. You'll learn how various techniques are used to trick users into providing personal information, including account credentials, and how users may enable hackers to access a target by unwittingly executing malicious content. After completing this module, you'll be able to describe techniques hackers use to compromise user accounts through email. Describe techniques hackers use to gain control over resources. Describe techniques hackers use to compromise data. Mitigate an account breach. Prevent an elevation of privilege attack. Prevent data exfiltration, data deletion, and data spillage. Explore today's work and threat landscape. Most attacks follow a common process referred to within the security industry as the kill chain. Briefly, an attack follows a basic pattern and proceeds from one step to the next to achieve the wanted outcomes. This stepwise process can be defended against by implementing security measures on choke points in the chain. Since any step can be bypassed through various exploitation techniques, the best strategies apply defenses at every step along the chain. Graphic of the kill chain scenario. The threat landscape across the globe has changed dramatically over the past several years, with hackers using more sophisticated methods to compromise users and networks alike. At the same time, more organizations are enjoying the benefits of cloud computing. But as companies move to the cloud, they're understandably concerned how Microsoft 365 will protect their users and data from being compromised by cyber criminals. Compared to a few years ago, companies today have many more factors to consider when dealing with different entities such as users, devices, apps, and data. While data is being shared with employees, business partners, and customers, organizations must protect users' identities and data stored on their devices and apps. Organizations also need to mitigate the risks of providing flexibility and space while maintaining company security policies and detecting threats, all while giving workers a better and more productive experience. This process can be overwhelming to many organizations that are concerned about losing control of sensitive data. Statistics show that most data breaches that have occurred could have been avoided by implementing the appropriate internal controls. As hackers become more sophisticated in their attacks, data theft continues to rise. Many businesses have declared a list of approved services and applications, but an alarming number of employees use non-approved third-party apps and personal storage services to store sensitive company documents. So how much control do companies have? In an on-premises environment, you have firewalls, email gateways, and proxies that can conduct content inspection. That protection boundary has now expanded to include mobile devices, tablets, and cloud assets. Often the devices that have access to a company's data are either lightly managed or not managed at all. Some companies may use mobile device management (MDM) solutions to help enforce some level of security, such as encrypting the device or configuring it for remote wipe in the event the device gets stolen. However, they still don't have any control when data on those devices moves outside their controlled environment. In today's cloud-centric world, organizations are faced with the unregulated, such as files on cloud storage services, and the unknown, such as advanced threats targeting users' email. This situation is more difficult to protect because data is now stored everywhere. It's on premises, on PCs, on phones, and in the cloud. Diagram that shows how much control companies have over their data. The question now becomes, how do companies operate in this world but still adhere to security and business requirements to protect information, particularly when you're dealing with not only your own intellectual property, but also personal identifiable information such as personal identification numbers and credit cards? How does your business protect that information? Microsoft is invested in addressing these challenges and in helping organizations be more secure by helping them to protect against, detect, and respond to various threat vectors. The remaining topics in this lesson examine the most common threat vectors that organizations must face today. Examine how phishing retrieves sensitive information. Attacks through email are one of the most common methods used by hackers to gain entry into a network. Users' computers and account credentials can become compromised through methods such as phishing, spoofing, and malware. Once a hacker can compromise a user's computer or credentials, it becomes easy for the hacker to threaten the security of an organization. Phishing is a technique a hacker uses to retrieve sensitive information, such as a user's account credentials or credit card number. For example, a user receives an email that appears to have been sent from a trustworthy source, such as a bank or the user's IT administrator. Phishing attempts often entice users to select a link to a malicious website that looks legitimate except for the URL of the website in question. Upon entering the site, users may be directed to enter personal information that hackers can then use to their advantage. Another possibility is that the site is infected with malware, which infects the user's computer with a payload such as virus. A computer virus is a type of malicious software program or malware. When executed, the virus replicates itself by modifying other computer programs and inserting its own code, infecting files, or even the boot sector of the hard drive. Trojan horse. A Trojan horse typically acts as a backdoor that enables a hacker to control or use the infected computer to the hacker's advantage. Depending on its design, a Trojan horse can accomplish many tasks, some of which include blocking antivirus software, installing applications, stealing passwords and credit card numbers, and infecting other computers and devices connected to the same network. Rootkit. A rootkit is a type of malware designed to provide a hacker with administrative access to a computer without being detected. When used, a rootkit can provide a hacker with full access to the computer. This access can lead to stealing or falsifying documents, the ability to hide other malware such as password stealing key loggers and viruses, and using the computer for attacks on other computers. Spyware. Spyware is often used to gather information about internet activity, keystrokes, passwords, and other sensitive data. Spyware can also be used as adware, where the software delivers pop-up ads and tracks user behavior. Spear phishing is a type of phishing attack directed at specific individuals. Spear phishing, or whaling, typically targets senior executives and other high-profile individuals, usually for financial gain. Spear phishing often masquerades as a legitimate email prompting the user to respond with sensitive information or select a link that installs malware that infects the user's computer with some type of payload. Phishing emails usually contain branding and URLs that, on the surface, appear legitimate. They also typically convey a sense of urgency to persuade the user to act quickly. In the following example, a user, Holly Dickinson, receives an email that appears to be legitimate. The message is designed to trick the user into clicking the link embedded in the message under the false pretense the user's account has expired. The user doesn't realize the link points to a malicious website that's either intended to collect the user's account credentials or download a malicious file. Examine how spoofing deceives users and compromises data security. A feature of the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, SMTP, enables a domain to send messages that represent another domain. When a sender spoofs an email address, they appear to be a user in one of your organization's domains, or a user in an external domain that sends email to your organization. Attackers who spoof senders to send spam or phishing email must be blocked. But there are scenarios where legitimate senders are spoofing. For example, legitimate scenarios for spoofing internal domains. Third-party senders use your domain to send bulk mail to your own employees for company polls. An external company generates and sends advertising or product updates on your behalf. An assistant regularly needs to send email for another person within your organization. An internal application sends email notifications. Legitimate scenarios for spoofing external domains. The sender is on a mailing list, also known as a discussion list, and the mailing list relays email from the original sender to all the participants on the mailing list. An external company sends email on behalf of another company, for example, an automated report or a software-as-a-service company. Inbound email messages are automatically protected against spoofing by Exchange Online Protection, EOP, in Microsoft 365 organizations with mailboxes in Exchange Online or standalone EOP organizations without Exchange Online mailboxes. EOP uses spoof intelligence as part of an organization's overall defense against phishing. Spoof intelligence, and specifically the default and only spoof intelligence policy in EOP, helps ensure that the spoofed email sent by legitimate senders doesn't get caught up in EOP spam filters or external email systems, while protecting your users from spam or phishing attacks. However, hackers have found ingenious ways to turn this perfectly legitimate process into a means of stealing personal information. They use a technique known as spoofing, which forges an email header so the message appears to recipients as having been sent from a trusted source. By doing so, attackers trick the recipient into divulging information such as account credentials, credit card information, or other sensitive information. When a user sees the sender information in the message, it looks like someone they know or a domain they trust, even though the message was sent from an attacker. An email message contains two sender addresses, the 5321.mailfrom, used by a sending mail server to identify the sender, shown in the header as return path, and the 5322.from, the address displayed as the from address by the mail client, shown in the header as from. The following Telnet SMTP transcript shows how the two addresses are defined during the SMTP conversation. Telnet SMTP transcript showing two addresses defined during the SMTP conversation. When the recipient receives this message in an email client such as Microsoft Outlook, they'll only see that it's from Woodgrove Bank Security at woodgrovebank.com. They won't realize that it was sent from fish@badguy.com. Compare spam and malware. While spam and bulk email are often a nuisance, they typically don't carry a payload that causes harm to a user's system. They just get in the way of a user's productivity. But similar to spoofing, attackers have taken a typically innocuous feature such as spam and bulk email and turned it into an attack vehicle. In this case, it's malware, which can cause great harm to an organization. Malware, which is short for malicious software, is often received in email as either an attachment or an embedded link to a malicious website or file. Malware typically works in two stages. Stage 1 is the attachment or website you visit that is infected. The malware then uses code to exploit a user's computer using macros in JavaScript to plant a payload such as a virus or Trojan horse. Stage 2 is delivering this payload. Example. While the sample code in the image below looks harmless enough, the two lines at the bottom of the image force the user's browser to be redirected to a malicious web. Examine how an account breach compromises a user account. In the previous units, you examined several methods an attacker can employ to collect, among other things, a user's login credentials. Another less commonly used method to obtain a user's account credentials is by using a password cracking tool. An account breach occurs when a user's account is compromised such that it can be used by an attacker to access network resources. When the account is an administrative account, the hacker can immediately begin scouring the network to gain access to critical data. If the breached account is a regular user, the hacker can use elevation of privilege techniques to obtain administrator privileges. Elevation of privilege is discussed in the next unit. Mitigating an account breach. One of the recommended methods that can be used to mitigate an account breach is to use multi-factor authentication (MFA). With MFA, users must complete an extra step to sign into services. The second authentication method can be an SMS text message, TFOB, or a phone call. These methods make it much more difficult for an attacker to steal an identity without the actual account owner knowing about it. You can protect against password cracking attempts by enabling directory controls against multiple failed login attempts, such as disabling the account after 3 failed attempts. If either solution is implemented after a breach, you should also monitor the account for a period to ensure that it hasn't been rebreached. Note: organizations can also classify, label, and protect their documents and emails by implementing Azure Active Directory Identity Protection, which is also known as Azure Identity Protection. This cloud-based solution offers identity protection to organizations by detecting attacks in near real time, informing them of risks, and applying controls to keep their enterprises safe. Azure Identity Protection is covered in detail later in this module. Examine elevation of privilege attacks. In an elevation of privilege scenario, once attackers have compromised one or more accounts, they then work to increase their power. In Microsoft 365, they usually want to acquire global administrator privileges. Specific service privileges are also desirable if the targeted data is in that product or service. Another common pivot at this point is for the hacker to create a new account and promote that new account to a global administrator. By doing so, the attacker can now hide in plain sight. In other words, the attacker will have an account that no one else is using. Usually, these accounts aren't noticed unless other administrators are regularly reviewing the global administrator account population. Preventing an elevation of privilege attack. In an elevation of privilege attack, user accounts are at the center of the attack pattern. As such, attackers target protection controls just as they do with an account breach. To counter these attacks, it's recommended that you implement Azure AD Multi-Factor Authentication (MFA). It's especially important to implement MFA on admin accounts and accounts with access to sensitive content. Besides MFA, one of the best protections you can employ is to keep the number of global administrators small. It's recommended that organizations have a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 5 global admins for any size of tenant. By doing so, you keep the target area small, which makes it difficult for an attacker to hide. It's also recommended that you implement a set of processes to regularly review the community of global admins and their activity, including auditing and alerts. In the event a breach of this nature occurs, you should carefully determine everything the attacker may have done to your data or to further entrench themselves in your tenancy. Look for new accounts that have had recent changes, such as promotion to a global administrator, global configuration changes, and every interaction with data from the affected accounts. Once you've successfully regained control of the breached accounts, you can usually reverse the changes that were made. You can then determine what, if any, communication steps you should take if data was removed or deleted. Pay careful attention to document access control lists, mailbox delegate permissions, mailbox forwarding rules, mail transport rules. Enabling MFA on the affected accounts is recommended. Examine how data exfiltration moves data out of your tenant. Once a network is compromised, an attacker can use various techniques to move data out of your tenant. Data exfiltration is the unauthorized retrieval of data from a computer or service. Data can be stolen in any number of ways. One of the most common methods is through a breach of an account that has access to the data. Another method is through system and infrastructure attacks that give the attacker local or system admin privileges to computers that store the data outside of Microsoft 365. Attackers are motivated by various goals, including theft of intellectual property, The intent to blackmail you. Selling your data on the black market. Using the data to further entrench themselves in your systems. Protecting data is complicated by the basic fact that data comes in various forms. Email, documents, instant messaging conversations, Yammer threads, even identifying your directory information can be useful to an attacker. Preventing data exfiltration. An organization should pursue different strategies to keep its data from being compromised. It should focus not only on the data itself, but also on the things needed to access the data, such as accounts. Protecting its service from account breaches and elevation of privilege attacks will be the first step in protecting its data. There are many strategies an organization can pursue to protect its data, including access control lists. Establish standards for determining who should have access to specific kinds of data. Then create processes to monitor and maintain those access controls. For example, if you have sensitive financials data in a SharePoint online site, ensure that the site and document libraries are restricted to only named individuals for only the minimum privileges they need, and that you regularly review the access control list. External sharing policies. Prevent data leakage to external endpoints by configuring your tenant to restrict certain types of sharing. For example, you can configure your tenant to not allow documents to be shared with any external people. These types of policies can be restrictive, so you may need to strike a balance between risk and productivity. Least privilege. Users will often grant permissions to documents and document libraries that exceed the access that's required. For example, view permission versus edit permission. Only grant the required minimum privilege to the smallest group of users that you can. Data classification schemes. Another key strategy is to use data classification metadata, particularly with data shared on SharePoint sites and OneDrive for Business. This process requires you to determine a set of risk tiers, such as high business impact, medium business impact, low business impact, and then require sites and documents to tag data in your systems with the appropriate classification. This strategy enables you to monitor sensitive data and use specific technologies to further protect high business impact data. Data loss prevention, DLP. The data classification scheme that's based on risk tiers, high business impact, medium business impact, low business impact, is most effective when used in combination with the DLP feature in Microsoft 365. This technology enables you to configure rules about how to handle data moving in and out of your tenant. It can prevent sensitive document content from being emailed to external parties, and prevent your users from sending social security numbers in email. Along with these recommendations, Microsoft 365 administrators can enable auditing, alerts, and advanced security management to detect suspicious behaviors or activities in the tenant. Examine how attackers delete data from your tenant. Data deletion occurs when an attacker deletes your data, usually in a way that makes recovery difficult, if not impossible. A variant of this type of attack includes ransomware. With ransomware, an attacker compromises the network, encrypts data, and then demands a payment to get the key to decrypt the data. This threat may result in data deletion, since a successful extraction of payment often leads to more targeting by the attacker. Attackers are motivated by various data deletion goals, including covering the tracks of an attack, attempting to do irreparable harm to your business, trying to spite you or your employees, preventing data deletion. Organizations typically focus their initial data protection mechanisms on preventing account breaches and elevation of privilege. They should then enhance their core prevention strategy by ensuring they have sufficient redundancies built into their data management processes to minimize the impact of data deletion. Data in Microsoft 365 is automatically backed up and made redundant for maximum availability by the service. That being said, it's still possible for an attacker to delete data from SharePoint sites and recycle bins, making it almost impossible to recover. Given this threat, it's critical that you employ a process for backing up critical data to offline stores that you know how to restore. Examine how data spillage exposes data outside your tenant. Data spillage is when a confidential document is released into an untrusted environment. When a data spillage incident is detected, it's important to quickly assess the size and locations of the spillage. Examine user activities around it. Permanently purge the spilled data from the system. Data spillage typically occurs when an employee unknowingly shares a highly confidential document with multiple people through email. If an event like this occurs, it's essential that you quickly assess who received this document internally and externally. Once identified, you should share case findings with other investigators to review, and then permanently remove the data from Microsoft 365. After the investigation is complete, you want to generate a report with the evidence of permanent removal and other case details for any future reference. The following instructions describe how to manage a data spillage event by permanently removing a message from Microsoft 365 so that it isn't accessible or recoverable. Step 1. Optional: manage who can access the case and set compliance boundaries. Depending on your organizational practice, you must control who can access the ediscovery case used to investigate a data spillage incident and set up compliance boundaries. The easiest way to control who can access a case is to add investigators as members of an existing role group in the Security and Compliance Center, and then add the role group as a member of the ediscovery case. For information about the built-in ediscovery role groups, and how to add members to an ediscovery case, see Assign ediscovery permissions. You can also create a new role group that aligns with your organizational needs. For example, by completing the following steps, you can create a group of data spillage investigators in the organization to access and collaborate on all data spillage cases. Create a data spillage investigator role group. Assign the appropriate roles: export, RMS decrypt, review, preview, compliance search, and case management. Add the data spillage investigators to the role group. Add the role group as a member of the data spillage ediscovery case. Additional reading. For more information, see Set up compliance boundaries for ediscovery investigations in Office 365. Step 2. Create an ediscovery case. An ediscovery case provides an effective way to manage your data spillage investigation. By creating an ediscovery case, you can add members to the role group that you created in Step 1. Add the role group as a member of new ediscovery case. Conduct iterative searches to find the spilled data. Export a report to share. Track the status of the case. Refer to the details of the case, if needed. Consider establishing a naming convention for ediscovery cases used for data spillage incidents. When creating a case, provide as much information as you can in the case name and description so you can locate and refer to in the future, if necessary. Step 3. Search for the spilled data. Once you've created a case and managed access, you can use the case to iteratively search to find the spilled data and identify the mailboxes that contain the spilled data. You'll use the same search query that you used to find the email messages to delete those same messages in Step 7. Important: the keywords that you use in the search query may contain the actual spilled data that you're searching for. For example, if you're searching for documents containing a Social Security number, SSN, and you use the SSN as the search keyword, you must delete the query afterwards to avoid further spillage, see Step 8. Step 4. Review and validate case findings. After you create a content search, you must verify the search results only consist of the email messages that must be deleted. In a content search, you can preview a random sampling of 1,000 email messages without exporting the search results to avoid further data spillage. If you've more than 1,000 mailboxes or more than 100 email messages per mailbox to review, you can divide the initial search into multiple searches. You can do so by using other keywords or conditions, such as date range or sender/recipient. The results of each search must then be reviewed individually. Make sure to document all search queries that were used for deleting messages in Step 7. If a custodian or end user is assigned an Office 365 E5 license, you can examine up to 10,000 search results at once using Advanced eDiscovery. If there are more than 10,000 email messages to review, you can divide the search query by date range and review each result individually as search results are sorted by date. In Advanced eDiscovery, you can tag search results using the label as feature in the preview panel and filter the search result by the tag you labeled. Tagging search results in this manner is helpful when you collaborate with a secondary reviewer. By using other analytics tools in Advanced eDiscovery, such as optical character recognition, email threading, and predictive coding, you can quickly process and review thousands of messages and tag them for further review. When you find an email message that contains spilled data, check the recipients of the message to determine if it was shared externally. To further trace a message, you can collect sender information and date range, so you can use the message trace logs. This process is described in Step 5. After you verified the search results, you may want to share your findings with others for a secondary review. People who you assign to the case in Step 1 can review the case content in both eDiscovery and Advanced eDiscovery and approve case findings. You can also generate a report without exporting the actual content. You can use this same report as a proof of deletion, which is described in Step 8. Step 5. Use message trace log to check how spilled data was shared. To further investigate whether email with spilled data was shared, you can optionally query the message trace logs with the sender information and the date range information that you gathered in Step 4. The retention period for message trace is 30 days for real-time data and 90 days for historical data. You can use message trace in the Security and Compliance Center, or use the corresponding cmdlets in Exchange Online PowerShell. It's important to note that message tracing doesn't offer full guarantees on the completeness of data returned. Step 6. Prepare the mailboxes. After you review and validate that the search results contain only the messages that must be deleted, you must collect a list of the email addresses of the affected mailboxes to use in Step 7 when you delete the spilled data. You may also have to prepare the mailboxes before you can permanently delete email messages depending on whether single item recovery is enabled on the mailboxes that contain the spilled data, or if any of those mailboxes are on hold. Step 7. Permanently delete the spilled data. Using the mailbox locations that you collected and prepared in Step 6 and the search query that was created and refined in Step 3 to find email messages that contain the spilled data, you can now permanently delete the spilled data. As previously explained, to delete messages, you have to be a member of the Organization Management Role Group or be assigned the Search and Purge Management role. Step 8. Verify, provide a proof of deletion, and audit. The final step in the workflow to manage a data spillage incident is to verify the spilled data was permanently removed from the mailbox. This task can be accomplished by going to the eDiscovery case and rerunning the same search query that was used to delete that data. In doing so, you should confirm that no results are returned. After you confirm the spilled data has been permanently removed, you can export a report and include it, along with the original report, as a proof of deletion. You're now ready to close the case, which will allow you to reopen it if you must refer to it in the future. Once you close the case, you can also revert mailboxes to their previous state. Delete the search query used to find the spilled data. Search for auditing records of tasks that were completed when managing the data spillage incident. Examine other types of attacks. Two other types of attacks worth mentioning are password cracking and malicious insider, because both are used in the kill chain of events. Password cracking. In this scenario, an attacker has acquired access to an application, service, or data store that allows them to try many different password combinations for an account. Using specialized software, attackers can try thousands upon thousands of combinations in a short amount of time. If the password is short, weak, common, or the same as another account password owned by the user, the chances are good that an attacker can guess the password and compromise the account. Preventing password cracking. Microsoft 365 uses Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, for authentication when federation isn't enabled. Azure AD temporarily disables an account after multiple sign-in failures. This process is referred to as Smart Password Lockout. Keep in mind that credentials can be stored in many other places in which attackers can attempt their cracking operation. If you aren't using Azure Active Directory for authentication, it's recommended that you enable directory controls against multiple failed sign-in attempts. This process will disable an account after several failed attempts. The number of failed attempts must be determined and supported by your organization. Malicious insider. In this scenario, one of your approved users is conducting illicit activities in your tenant. These sorts of attacks can be the most damaging because the user usually knows a lot about your company and clearly understands how to maximize the negative impact to the company and its data. Motivations for a malicious insider vary, but typical ones include disgruntled employees looking for ways to make extra money. Before leaving the company, they want to cause issues for others. To harm specific individuals or the organization as a whole. A malicious insider may even take steps to ensure long-term access by building in backdoor accounts or go straight to exfiltration or deleting sensitive data. Users with administrative rights are typically the most dangerous malicious insiders. Preventing the malicious insider scenario. As with the other scenarios in the kill chain, you must ensure that your accounts are secure, privileges are well managed, and data is well protected. In most cases, the attacker has achieved all the required prerequisites to execute any attack. As a result, the focus on prevention should be to ensure that you have processes that enable you to discern motive. Ensure that you have ways to identify disgruntled or unhappy employees and ways to protect yourself from short-term vendors and contingent staff by implementing access controls and auditing. Summary. In this module, you learn that a threat vector is a path or means by which a hacker, or threat actor, can gain access to a target. The target can be anything of value to the hacker. You learn that common targets include computers and servers, usernames and passwords, known as account credentials, personal information, financial information, an organization's plans for a new marketing campaign. In this module, you examine the types of threats vectors and their potential outcomes that organizations must deal with each day. You learned how various techniques are used to trick users into providing personal information, including account credentials, and how users may enable hackers to access a target by unwittingly executing malicious content. This module examined the techniques hackers use to compromise user accounts through email. It also examined the techniques hackers use to gain control over resources. To address these issues, you learned how to mitigate an account breach, how to prevent an elevation of privilege attack, and how to prevent data exfiltration, data deletion, and data spillage. Explore the Zero Trust Security Model. This module examines the concepts and principles of the Zero Trust Security Model, as well as how Microsoft 365 supports it, and how your organization can implement it. Learning objectives. By the end of this module, you will be able to describe the Zero Trust approach to security in Microsoft 365. Describe the principles and components of the Zero Trust Security Model. Describe the 5 steps to implementing a Zero Trust Security Model in your organization. Explain Microsoft's story and strategy around Zero Trust networking. Introduction. Today's organizations need a new security model that effectively adapts to the complexity of the modern environment, embraces the mobile workforce, protects people, devices, apps, and data wherever they're located. The security model to support this modern reality is called Zero Trust. If there's one thing that recent events have shown, it's that security isn't getting any easier. Recent high-profile breach activity has underscored the growing sophistication of today's threat actors and the complexity of managing business risk in an increasingly connected world. It's a struggle for organizations of every size and for the public and private sector alike. As organizations move into this next phase of digital transformation, with technology increasingly woven into our most basic human activities, the questions they must ask themselves as security defenders include: how do we help people to have confidence in the security of their devices, their data, and their actions online? How do we protect people so they have peace of mind and are empowered to innovate and grow their future? How do we foster trust in a zero-trust world? As defenders ourselves, Microsoft is a passionate proponent of the zero-trust mindset, encompassing all types of threats both outside in and inside out. Microsoft believes the right approach is to address security, compliance, identity, and device management as an interdependent whole, and to extend protection to all data, devices, identities, platforms, and clouds, whether those things are from Microsoft or not. Microsoft is deeply inspired to enable people everywhere to do the important work of defending their communities and their organizations in an ever-evolving threat landscape. In this module, you'll learn about the concepts and principles of the Zero Trust model and how Microsoft 365 supports it. After completing this module, you'll be able to describe the Zero Trust approach to security in Microsoft 365. Describe the principles and components of the Zero Trust security model. Describe the 5 steps to implementing a Zero Trust security model in your organization. Explain Microsoft's story and strategy around Zero Trust networking. Examine the principles and components of the Zero Trust model. Instead of assuming everything behind the corporate firewall is safe, the Zero Trust model assumes every request is a potential breach. As such, every request must be verified as though it originates from an open network. Regardless of where the request originates or what resource it accesses, Zero Trust teaches us to never trust, always verify. Every access request is fully authenticated, authorized, and encrypted before granting access. Microsegmentation and least privileged access principles are applied to minimize lateral movement. Rich intelligence and analytics are used to detect and respond to anomalies in real time. Zero Trust principles. The underlying principles that provide the foundation of the Zero Trust model include: verify explicitly. Always authenticate and authorize based on all available data points, including user identity, location, device health, service or workload, data classification, and anomalies. Use least privileged access. Limit user access with just-in-time (JIT) and just-enough access (JEA), risk-based adaptive policies, and data protection to help secure both data and productivity. Assume breach. Minimize blast radius for breaches and prevent lateral movement by segmenting access by network, user, devices, and app awareness. Verify all sessions are encrypted from start to finish. Use analytics to get visibility and drive threat detection and improve defenses. Zero Trust components. The Zero Trust model consists of the following primary components: identities. Verify and secure each identity with strong authentication across your entire digital estate. Devices. Gain visibility into devices accessing the network. Ensure compliance and health status before granting access. Applications. Discover shadow IT applications, ensure appropriate in-app permissions and gate access based on real-time analytics, and monitor and control user actions. Data. Move from perimeter-based data protection to data-driven protection. Use intelligence to classify and label data. Encrypt and restrict access based on organizational policies. Infrastructure. Use telemetry to detect attacks and anomalies, automatically block and flag risky behavior, and employ least privilege access principles. Network. Ensure devices and users are not trusted just because they are on an internal network. Encrypt all internal communications, limit access by policy, and employ microsegmentation and real-time threat detection. Additional reading. For more information on Zero Trust security, see the Zero Trust maturity model. Plan for a Zero Trust security model in your organization. In some ways, the easiest way to think about Zero Trust is to assume everything is on the open internet, even resources we think are safe in our walled gardens. With Zero Trust, we move from the world of implicit assumptions that are made based on single elements to explicit verification of all elements of access. Many organizations harden their external access points by requiring multi-factor authentication, MFA, or certifications to access their VPN. However, in Microsoft's investigations, it has seen time and time again that either because of new exploits or because of exceptions made to reduce friction with demanding and sometimes VIP workers, the assumption that if they are on my network, it's okay isn't good enough. A successful Zero Trust strategy requires flexible access to applications, systems, and data while maintaining security for both users and the resources they need to do their jobs. The 5 steps that organizations should follow to secure their identity infrastructure include: 1. Strengthen your credentials. If users in your identity system are using weak passwords and not strengthening them with MFA, it isn't a matter of if, or when you get compromised, just how often you'll be compromised. 2. Reduce your attack surface area. To make life harder for hackers, eliminate using older, less secure protocols, limit access entry points, and exercise more significant control of administrative access to resources. 3. Automate threat response. Reduce costs and risks by reducing the time criminals have to embed themselves into your environment. 4. Increase your awareness. Use auditing and logging of security-related events and related alerts to help detect patterns that may indicate internal attacks or attempted or successful external penetration of your network. 5. Enable user self-help. Reduce friction by enabling your users to stay productive, even as you remain vigilant. Additional reading. For more information, see 5 steps to securing your identity infrastructure. Move from a model of implicit trust to one of explicit verification. To implement a zero-trust model and assuming that all users, applications, and machines are on the internet, you must move from a model of implicit trust to one of explicit verification, where, rather than assuming you have a user that's in a high-assurance session, for example, MFA, because of the network, the claim must be verified explicitly. Instead of assuming the user has a valid machine because of the network, the device must be verified explicitly. Instead of allowing access to file shares because the users on the network, data must be explicitly classified and encrypted. To determine the overall risk of each session, a robust zero-trust strategy must consider the full context of the session, which includes the identity of the user, the state of the user's device, the apps being used, the sensitivity of the data the user is trying to access. A zero-trust model then applies holistic policies that define when to allow, block, or restrict access. These policies control access by requiring extra authentication challenges, such as MFA, limiting functionality such as downloads, or applying compliance controls such as terms of use. This way, a hacker trying to gain access using stolen credentials on an unknown device will be blocked, as will a verified user running a healthy device trying to access data they don't have permission to see. This strategy not only protects against external threats, but it also helps create guardrails so well-meaning employees can use organizational resources responsibly. Zero Trust using Azure AD Conditional Access. Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, provides the strong, adaptive, standards-based identity verification required in a zero-trust framework. While Azure AD provides intrinsically strong authentication, including automatic adaptive protection against many attacks, it also allows admins to express their access requirements in simple terms. Virtually every aspect of each sign-in, including associated user or session risk, is available to define the conditions under which access policies are applied. A framework of controls such as extra authentication factors, terms of use, limited access, and other session semantics regulates access. These controls guarantee that organizations are secure at access in their zero-trust approach. Zero-trust assessment tool. Different organizational requirements, existing technology implementations, and security stages all affect how a zero-trust security model implementation is planned and executed. The Zero Trust Assessment tool will help you determine where you are in your journey across your identities, devices, apps, infrastructure, network, and data. It will also tell you which maturity stage you're at, traditional, advanced, or optimal. The assessment will provide recommendations on how to progress to the next stage. To take the Zero Trust Assessment, see the Zero Trust Assessment tool. Additional reading. To learn more about Microsoft's own implementation of a zero-trust security model, see Implementing a Zero-Trust Security Model at Microsoft. Examine Microsoft's strategy for zero-trust networking. Today, employees access their organization's resources from anywhere using various devices and apps. Access control policies that focus only on who can access a resource aren't sufficient. To master the balance between security and productivity, security admins must also factor in how a resource is being accessed. Microsoft has a story and strategy around zero trust networking. Azure Active Directory Conditional Access is the foundational building block of how customers can implement a zero trust network approach. Conditional access and Azure Active Directory identity protection make dynamic access control decisions based on user, device, location, and session risk for every resource request. They combine confirmed runtime signals about the security state of a Windows device, the trustworthiness of the user session and identity to arrive at the strongest possible security posture. Conditional access provides a set of policies that can be configured to control the circumstances in which users can access corporate resources. Considerations for access include user role, group membership, device health and compliance, mobile applications, location, sign-in risk. These considerations are used to decide whether to allow access, deny access, control access. Access can be controlled with extra authentication challenges, for example, multi-factor authentication, terms of use, or access restrictions. Conditional access works robustly with any application configured for access with Azure Active Directory. To accomplish the zero trust model, Microsoft integrates several components and capabilities in Microsoft 365, including Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection, Azure Active Directory, Windows Defender System Guard, Microsoft Intune. Additional reading. For more information on zero trust networking, see Building Zero Trust Networks with Microsoft 365. Adopt a zero trust approach. Organizations should adopt a zero trust approach to security protection to meet today's most challenging security demands. This approach covers 4 key areas: identity, security, compliance, and skilling. 1. Identity, the starting point of a zero trust approach. Adopting a zero trust strategy is a journey. Every single step your organization takes will make it more secure. In today's world, with disappearing corporate network perimeters, identity is an organization's first line of defense. While each organization's zero trust journey will be unique, if you're wondering where to start, Microsoft recommends that you start with a strong cloud identity foundation. The most fundamental steps like strong authentication, protecting user credentials, and protecting devices are the most essential. Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, Microsoft's cloud identity solution, provides the following features that can help organizations on their zero trust journey. Passwordless authentication. This feature eliminates one of the weakest links in security today. It's now generally available for cloud and hybrid environments. Passwordless authentication creates a complete experience for all employees, so they no longer need passwords to sign into the network. Instead, Azure AD now lets them sign in with biometrics, or a tap using Windows Hello for Business, the Microsoft Authenticator app, or a compatible FIDO2 security key from Microsoft Intelligent Security Association partners such as Yubico, Phaeton, and OftenTrend. With Temporary Access Pass, you can generate a time-limited code to set up or recover a passwordless credential. Azure AD Conditional Access. This feature is the policy engine at the heart of Microsoft's Zero Trust solution. It uses authentication context to enforce even more granular policies based on user actions within the app they're using or sensitivity of data they're trying to access. This design helps organizations protect important information without unduly restricting access to less sensitive content. Azure AD Verifiable Credentials. Verifiable credentials let organizations confirm information like their education or the professional certifications someone provides without collecting and storing their personal data. This design improves security and privacy. Microsoft's partnerships that integrate Azure AD verifiable credentials with leading identity verification providers will also improve verifiability and secure information exchange. 2. Security, simplifying the Assume Breach toolset. In today's landscape, an organization's security approach should start with the key zero trust principle of assume breach. But too often, complexity and fragmentation stand in the way. Microsoft is committed to helping you solve these issues, as it builds security for all, delivered from the cloud. This commitment begins with integrated solutions that let organizations focus on what matters and deliver visibility across all their platforms and all their clouds. Some vendors deliver endpoint or email protection. Others deliver security information and event management (SIEM) tools. Integrating these pieces together can be a time-consuming challenge. Microsoft takes a holistic approach that combines best-of-breed SIEM and extended detection and response (XDR) tools built from the ground up in the cloud to improve your posture, protection, and response. This design gives organizations the best of breed combined with the best of integration, so they don't have to compromise. Microsoft provides the following features to simplify the experience for defenders with modern and integrated capabilities. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint and Defender for Office 365 customers can investigate and remediate threats from the Microsoft 365 Defender portal. It provides unified alerts, user and investigation pages for deep, automated analysis, and simple visualization. It also provides a new learning hub where customers can use instructional resources with best practices and how-tos. Incidents, schema, and user experiences are now common between Microsoft 365 Defender and Azure Sentinel. Microsoft continues to expand connectors for Azure Sentinel and work to simplify data ingestion and automation. Threat Analytics provides a set of reports from expert Microsoft security researchers that help you understand, prevent, and mitigate active threats, like the Solorigate attacks, directly within Microsoft 365 Defender. Microsoft has brought Secured Core to Windows Server and Edge devices to help minimize risk from firmware vulnerabilities and advanced malware in IoT and hybrid cloud environments. Microsoft continues and strengthens its commitment to deliver state-of-the-art protection, detection, and response for all clouds and all platforms. One such solution it provides is Defender for Endpoint, which is available for Android, iOS, macOS, Linux, and Windows. Microsoft also provides Azure Sentinel, which looks across your multi-cloud environments, including AWS, Google Cloud Platform, Salesforce Service Cloud, VMware, and Cisco Umbrella. 3. Compliance, protection from the inside out. At Microsoft, Zero Trust isn't only the practice of protecting against outside-in threats, but also protecting from the inside out. Addressing the area of compliance includes managing risks related to data. This data is more than just the data stored in the Microsoft cloud. It also includes the data from across the breadth of clouds and platforms an organization uses. Microsoft has invested in creating that inside-out protection by extending its capabilities to third parties to help organizations reduce risk across their entire digital estate. Microsoft provides the following new innovations in compliance: co-authoring of documents protected with Microsoft Information Protection. This feature enables multiple users to work simultaneously on protected documents while taking advantage of the intelligent, unified, and extensible protection for documents and emails across Microsoft 365 apps. Microsoft 365 Insider Risk Management Analytics, which can identify potential insider risk activity within an organization and help inform policy configurations. With one selection, a customer can have the system run a daily scan of its tenant audit logs, including historical activity, and use Microsoft 365's Insider Risk Management machine learning engine to identify potential risky activity with privacy built in by design. Microsoft 365 now offers data loss prevention, DLP, for Chrome browsers and on-premises server-based environments such as file shares and SharePoint Server. Azure Purview is integrated with Microsoft Information Protection. CyDesign enables organizations to apply the same sensitivity labels defined in Microsoft 365 Compliance Center to data that's stored in other clouds or on-premises. With Azure Purview, a unified data governance solution for on-premises, multi-cloud, and software as a service (SaaS) data, organizations can scan and classify data located in AWS Simple Storage Services, S3, SAP ECC, SAP S/4HANA, and Oracle Database. 4. Skilling. Power your future through security skilling. Many organizations continue to struggle to fill the security skills gap. That's why Microsoft strives to ensure organizations have the skilling and learning resources they need to keep up in today's world of complex cybersecurity attacks. Microsoft provides two different ways of helping organizations skill cybersecurity professionals. First, Microsoft has 4 new security, compliance, and identity certifications tailored to organizations' roles and needs. Security, Compliance, and Identity Fundamentals. This certification helps individuals get familiar with the fundamentals of security, compliance, and identity across cloud-based and related Microsoft services. Information Protection Administrator Associate. This certification focuses on planning and implementing controls that meet organizational compliance needs. Security Operations Analyst Associate. This certification helps security operational professionals design threat protection and response systems. Identity and Access Administrator Associate. This certification helps individuals design, implement, and operate an organization's identity and access management systems by using Azure Active Directory. While today's world is complex, growing your skills shouldn't be. The Microsoft Security Technical Content Library will help organizations find content relevant to its needs. Use it to access content based on your own needs today. Summary. In this module, you learn that today's organizations need a new security model that effectively adapts to the complexity of the modern environment, embraces the mobile workforce, protects people, devices, apps, and data wherever they're located. This module introduced you to the security model that supports this modern reality, which is called Zero Trust. This module began by showing how security isn't getting any easier. Recent high-profile breach activity has underscored the growing sophistication of today's threat actors. These activities have also shown how complex it is to manage business risk in an increasingly connected world. It's a struggle for organizations of every size and for the public and private sector alike. This module showed how Microsoft is a passionate proponent of the Zero Trust mindset, encompassing all types of threats both outside in and inside out. Microsoft believes the right approach is to address security, compliance, identity, and device management as an interdependent whole, and to extend protection to all data, devices, identities, platforms, and clouds, whether those things are from Microsoft or not. This module showed how Microsoft is deeply inspired to enable people everywhere to do the important work of defending their communities and their organizations in an ever-evolving threat landscape. You learn about the concepts and principles of the Zero Trust model, and how Microsoft 365 supports it. This module covered the 5 steps to implementing a Zero Trust security model in your organization. It also examined Microsoft's story and strategy around Zero Trust networking. Explore security solutions in Microsoft 365. This module introduces you to several features in Microsoft 365 that can help protect your organization against cyber threats, detect when a user or computer has been compromised, and monitor your organization for suspicious activities. Learning objectives. By the end of this module, you will be able to identify the features of Microsoft Defender for Office 365 that enhance email security in a Microsoft 365 deployment. Explain how Microsoft Defender for Identity identifies, detects, and investigates advanced threats, compromised identities, and malicious insider actions directed at your organization. Explain how Microsoft Defender for Endpoint helps enterprise networks prevent, detect, investigate, and respond to advanced threats. Describe how Microsoft 365 threat intelligence can be beneficial to your organization's security officers and administrators. Describe how Microsoft Cloud App Security enhances visibility and control over your Microsoft 365 tenant through 3 core areas. Introduction. Attackers can use various threat vectors to access targets within an organization. They can methodically work their way from one step to another in the kill chain once a user or computer has been compromised. This module introduces you to several features in Microsoft 365 that can help protect your organization against cyber threats, detect when a user or computer has been compromised, and monitor your organization for suspicious activities. The feature areas that will be discussed in this training include Exchange Online Protection. Microsoft Defender for Office 365, formerly Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection. Microsoft 365 Threat Intelligence. Auditing and Alerts. Advanced Security Management. This module provides a high-level overview of each of these areas, all of which will be discussed in greater detail in later training. After completing this module, you'll be able to identify the features of Microsoft Defender for Office 365 that enhance email security in a Microsoft 365 deployment. Explain how Microsoft Defender for Identity identifies, detects, and investigates advanced threats, compromised identities, and malicious insider actions directed at your organization. Explain how Microsoft Defender for Endpoint helps enterprise networks prevent, detect, investigate, and respond to advanced threats. Describe how Microsoft 365 Threat Intelligence can be beneficial to your organization's security officers and administrators. Describe how Microsoft Cloud App Security enhances visibility and control over your Microsoft 365 tenant. Note: Microsoft Defender for Office 365, Threat Intelligence, Advanced Security Management, and most of the alert capabilities require a Microsoft 365 E5 subscription for your organization. If you don't have that plan and want to try these features, you can sign up for a trial of Microsoft 365 Enterprise E5. Enhance your email security using Microsoft Defender for Office 365. Microsoft 365 services provide email protection against spoofing and phishing attacks, spam, and malware with Exchange Online Protection, EOP. EOP provides email security through a combination of techniques including IP and URL reputation, domain reputation, spam filtering, malware filtering, content filtering, connection filtering. However, as hackers around the globe launch increasingly sophisticated attacks, organizations need tools that provide extra protection. A typical outbreak consists of two parts: a zero-day attack, malware with unknown signatures, an elongated period of attack. Traditional antivirus/anti-spam solutions can't protect against a zero-day attack, which means attackers can go unnoticed. The most efficient solution for email security in Microsoft 365 is when the protection provided by EOP is extended by enabling Microsoft Defender for Office 365, formerly Advanced Threat Protection or ATP, in the tenant. Microsoft Defender for Office 365 is a collection of features designed to combat advanced targeted threats such as zero-day malware attacks, certain types of phishing campaigns, and malicious URLs embedded in email and documents. These features include safe attachments. Protects against zero-day malicious attachments by opening a suspected, unknown attachment in a special hypervisor environment and testing for malicious activity. It's designed to detect malicious attachments even before antivirus signatures are available. Safe links. Provides time-of-click protection, which prevents users from going to malicious websites and phishing scams when they select links in email and documents. Spoof intelligence. Detects when a sender appears to be sending mail on behalf of one or more user accounts within one of your organization's domains. It enables you to review all senders who are spoofing your domain, and then choose to allow the sender to continue or block the sender. Spoof intelligence is available in the Microsoft 365 Security Center on the Anti-Spam Settings page, Threat Management Policy Anti-Spam. Quarantine. Messages can be sent to quarantine that are identified by the Microsoft 365 service as spam, bulk mail, phishing mail, containing malware, or because they matched a mail flow rule. By default, Microsoft 365 sends phishing messages and messages containing malware directly to quarantine. Authorized users can review, delete, or manage email messages sent to quarantine. Anti-phishing. Applies a set of machine learning models together with impersonation detection algorithms to incoming messages to provide protection for commodity and spear phishing attacks. All messages are subject to an extensive set of machine learning models trained to detect phishing messages, together with a set of advanced algorithms used to protect against various user and domain impersonation attacks. Anti-phishing features within Microsoft Defender for Office 365 protects your organization according to policies that are set by your Microsoft 365 global or security administrators. The following graphic shows EOP and the primary Microsoft Defender for Office 365 features against threats that are incoming through email. Protect your organization's identities using Microsoft Defender for Identity. Microsoft Defender for Identity, formerly known as Azure Advanced Threat Protection, or Azure ATP, is a cloud-based security solution that uses your on-premises Active Directory signals to identify, detect, and investigate advanced threats, compromised identities, and malicious insider actions directed at your organization. Microsoft Defender for Identity enables security operation analysts and security professionals struggling to detect advanced attacks in hybrid environments to monitor users, entity behavior, and activities with learning-based analytics. Protect user identities and credentials stored in Active Directory. Identify and investigate suspicious user activities and advanced attacks throughout the kill chain. Provide clear incident information on a simple timeline for fast triage. Monitor and profile user behavior and activities. Microsoft Defender for Identity monitors and analyzes user activities and information across your network. This analysis creates a behavioral baseline for each user. Defender for Identity then uses these behavioral baselines to help identify user anomalies with adaptive built-in intelligence. This reporting provides organizations with insights into suspicious activities and events, revealing the advanced threats, compromised users, and insider threats that they face. Defender for Identity also includes proprietary sensors that monitor organizational domain controllers. This analysis provides a comprehensive view for all user activities from every device. Protect user identities and reduce the attack surface. Defender for Identity provides organizations with invaluable insights on identity configurations and suggested security best practices. Through security reports and user profile analytics, Defender for Identity helps dramatically reduce your organizational attack surface. This design makes it harder to compromise user credentials and advance an attack. Defenders for Identity's visual lateral movement paths help you quickly understand exactly how an attacker can move laterally inside your organization to compromise sensitive accounts. It also helps to prevent those risks in advance. Defender for Identity provides reports that identify users and devices that authenticate using clear text passwords. They also provide extra insights to improve your organizational security posture and policies. Active Directory Federation Services, ADFS, plays an important role in today's infrastructure when it comes to authentication in hybrid environments. Defender for Identity protects the ADFS in your environment by detecting on-premises attacks on the ADFS. It also provides visibility into authentication events generated by the ADFS. Identify suspicious activities and advanced attacks across the cyber attack kill chain. Typically, attacks are launched against any accessible entity, such as a low-privileged user. These attacks quickly move laterally until the attacker gains access to valuable assets, such as sensitive accounts, domain administrators, and highly sensitive data. Defender for Identity identifies these advanced threats at the source throughout the entire cyber attack kill chain. Reconnaissance identifies rogue users and attackers' attempts to gain information. Attackers are searching for information about usernames, users' group membership, IP addresses assigned to devices, resources, and more, using various methods. Compromised credentials identifies attempts to compromise user credentials using brute force attacks, failed authentications, user group membership changes, and other methods. Lateral movements detects attempts to move laterally inside the network to gain further control of sensitive users, using methods such as pass the ticket, pass the hash, overpass the hash, and more. Domain dominance highlights attacker behavior if domain dominance is achieved. Detection occurs using remote code execution on the domain controller, and methods such as DC shadow, malicious domain controller replication, golden ticket activities, and more. Investigate alerts and user activities. Defender for Identity is designed to reduce general alert noise. It provides only relevant, important security alerts in a simple, real-time organizational attack timeline. The Defender for Identity Attack Timeline view allows you to easily stay focused on what matters by applying the intelligence of smart analytics. Organizations can use Defender for Identity to quickly investigate threats and gain insights across the organization for users, devices, and network resources. Integration with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint provides another layer of enhanced security. This integration applies extra detection and protection against advanced persistent threats on the operating system. Protect your enterprise network against advanced threats using Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is an enterprise endpoint security platform designed to help enterprise networks prevent, detect, investigate, and respond to advanced threats. Defender for Endpoint uses a combination of the following technology built into Windows 10 and Microsoft's robust cloud service. Endpoint behavioral sensors. Embedded in Windows 10, these sensors collect and process behavioral signals from the operating system and send the sensor data to your private, isolated, cloud instance of Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Cloud Security Analytics. Uses big data, device learning, and unique Microsoft optics across the Windows ecosystem, enterprise cloud products, such as Microsoft 365, and online assets. Behavioral signals are translated into insights, detections, and recommended responses to advanced threats. Threat intelligence. Generated by Microsoft hunters, security teams, and augmented by threat intelligence provided by partners. Threat intelligence enables Defender for Endpoint to identify attacker tools, techniques, and procedures and generate alerts when they're observed in collected sensor data. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint provides a complete endpoint security solution. It integrates the following features to deliver preventative protection, post-breach detection, automated investigation and response. Threat and vulnerability management. Effectively identifying, assessing, and remediating endpoint weaknesses is pivotal in running a healthy security program and reducing organizational risk. Threat and vulnerability management serves as an infrastructure for reducing organizational exposure, hardening endpoint surface area, and increasing organizational resilience. Discover vulnerabilities and misconfigurations in real time with sensors and without the need of agents or periodic scans. It ranks vulnerabilities based on the threat landscape, detections in your organization, sensitive information on vulnerable devices, and business context. Attack surface reduction. Help reduce your attack surfaces by minimizing the places where your organization is vulnerable to cyber threats and attacks. The attack surface reduction set of capabilities provides the first line of defense in the stack. By ensuring configuration settings are properly set and exploit mitigation techniques are applied, the capabilities resist attacks and exploitation. This set of capabilities is defined in the following table. Attack surface reduction. Reduce vulnerabilities, attack surfaces, in your applications with intelligent rules that help stop malware. Requires Microsoft Defender antivirus. Hardware-based isolation. Protect and maintain the integrity of a system as it starts and while it's running. Validate system integrity through local and remote attestation. And use container isolation for Microsoft Edge to help guard against malicious websites. Application control. Use application control so that your applications must earn trust to run. Exploit protection. Help protect operating systems and apps your organization uses from being exploited. Exploit protection also works with third-party antivirus solutions. Network protection. Extend protection to your network traffic and connectivity on your organization's devices. Requires Microsoft Defender antivirus. Web protection. Secure your devices against web threats and help you regulate unwanted content. Controlled folder access. Help prevent malicious or suspicious apps, including file encrypting ransomware malware, from making changes to files in your key system folders. Requires Microsoft Defender antivirus. Network firewall. Prevent unauthorized traffic from flowing to or from your organization's devices with two-way network traffic filtering. Microsoft Defender antivirus. the next-generation protection component of Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. This protection brings together machine learning, big data analysis, in-depth threat resistance research, and the Microsoft Cloud infrastructure to protect devices in your enterprise organization. Your next-generation protection services include the following capabilities: behavior-based, heuristic, and real-time antivirus protection, which includes always-on scanning using file and process behavior monitoring and other heuristics, also known as real-time protection. It also includes detecting and blocking apps that are considered unsafe, but might not be detected as malware. Cloud-delivered protection, which includes near-instant detection and blocking of new and emerging threats. Dedicated protection and product updates, which include updates related to keeping Microsoft Defender antivirus up to date. Endpoint detection and response. Endpoint detection and response capabilities are put in place to detect, investigate, and respond to advanced threats that may have made it past the first two security pillars. Advanced hunting provides a query-based threat hunting tool that lets you proactively find breaches and create custom detections. Endpoint detection and response capabilities provide advanced attack detections that are near real-time and actionable. Security analysts can prioritize alerts effectively, gain visibility into the full scope of a breach, and take response actions to remediate threats. When a threat is detected, alerts are created in the system for an analyst to investigate. Alerts with the same attack techniques or attributed to the same attacker are aggregated into an entity called an incident. Aggregating alerts in this manner makes it easy for analysts to collectively investigate and respond to threats. Automated investigation and remediation. By quickly responding to advanced attacks, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint offers automatic investigation and remediation (AIR) capabilities that help reduce the volume of alerts in minutes at scale. The technology in automated investigation uses various inspection algorithms and is based on processes that are used by security analysts. AIR capabilities are designed to examine alerts and take immediate action to resolve breaches. AIR capabilities significantly reduce alert volume, allowing security operations to focus on more sophisticated threats and other high-value initiatives. All remediation actions, whether pending or completed, are tracked in the Action Center. In the Action Center, pending actions are approved or rejected, and completed actions can be undone if needed. Microsoft Secure Score for devices. Defender for Endpoint includes Microsoft Secure Score for devices to help you dynamically assess the security state of your enterprise network, identify unprotected systems, and take recommended actions to improve the overall security of your organization. Your score for devices is visible in the Threat and Vulnerability Management dashboard of the Microsoft Defender Security Center. A higher Microsoft Secure Score for devices means your endpoints are more resilient from cybersecurity threat attacks. It reflects the collective security configuration state of your devices across the following categories: application, operating system, network, accounts, security controls. Microsoft Threat Experts. Microsoft Threat Experts is a managed threat hunting service that provides your security operations centers, SOCs, with expert-level monitoring and analysis to help them ensure that critical threats in your unique environments don't get missed. This managed threat hunting service provides expert-driven insights and data through these two capabilities: targeted attack notification and access to experts on demand. Microsoft Threat Experts provides proactive hunting for the most important threats to your network, including human adversary intrusions, hands-on keyboard attacks, or advanced attacks like cyber espionage. These notifications show up as a new alert. The managed hunting service includes threat monitoring and analysis, reducing dwell time and risk to the business. Hunter-trained artificial intelligence to discover and rank both known and unknown attacks. Identifying the most important risks, helping SOCs maximize time and energy. Scope of compromise and as much context as can be quickly delivered to enable fast SOC response. Organizations and engage Microsoft security experts directly from within Microsoft Defender Security Center for timely and accurate response. Experts provide insights needed to better understand the complex threats affecting your organization, from alert inquiries, potentially compromised devices, root cause of a suspicious network connection, to extra threat intelligence about ongoing advanced persistent threat campaigns. With this capability, you can get extra clarification on alerts including root cause or scope of the incident, gain clarity into suspicious device behavior and next steps if faced with an advanced attacker, determine risk and protection concerning threat actors, campaigns, or emerging attacker techniques. Protect against cyber attacks using Microsoft 365 Threat Intelligence. Microsoft 365 Threat Intelligence is a cloud-based service that provides organizations broad visibility into the threat landscape. It also delivers actionable insights and enables proactive cyber defense. By providing detailed reports, alerts, and recommendations, organizations can use Microsoft 365 Threat Intelligence to make data-driven decisions on their cybersecurity requirements. They can also gain insight into how threats are manifested, who is being threatened, the types of threats, and the frequency of those threats. Microsoft 365 Threat Intelligence integrates with other Microsoft 365 security features like Exchange Online Protection and Microsoft Defender for Office 365. Microsoft 365 Threat Intelligence takes advantage of rich signals from the Microsoft Intelligent Security Graph, giving organizations access to the same threat intelligence feeds that Microsoft itself uses. By using Microsoft 365 Threat Intelligence to protect, detect, and respond to threats, any size organization can track and respond to today's most serious threats in real time in one place, store high-value data, ensure business continuity, and reduce risk, proactively detect advanced attacks before they reach the organization, gain insights from our broad global presence, systematically help protect the organization with dynamic policy recommendations, take action on malware threats in real time, gain visibility into top targeted users, use dashboard components that range from global trends to investigation starting points. The Microsoft 365 Threat Intelligence Service is available to Office 365 Enterprise E5 subscribers. This service gives insights on advanced threats, malware, phishing, and other attacks for proactive defense. Reports on attacks that are happening in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. It creates insights on what Microsoft 365 blocks or stops, for instance, based on signals from the broader Microsoft ecosystem, which includes Office, Windows, Azure, and other sources. Shows how many threats were detected on a given day, how many messages were scanned, and how many threats were stopped, blocked, or removed. Integrates data from 3,500 Microsoft security specialists who search data to detect advanced threats. Unique features of Microsoft 365 Threat Intelligence. Microsoft 365 is one of the biggest enterprise email services and productivity suites in the world. To help protect information and spot patterns in Microsoft 365, Microsoft has built a vast repository of threat intelligence data. Some of the capabilities and features in Microsoft 365 Threat Intelligence include: Threat Dashboard enables Chief Information Security Officers, CISO, and security administrators to quickly gain broad and deep visibility into the global threat landscape. This information helps security admins determine the origin of threats, potential threat actors, the types of threats, how best to remediate existing threats, and proactively develop strategies against future threats. Threat Explorer provides security analysts with reports and graphical views of the threat landscape and their tenant. It provides actionable insights and recommendations on policy and enforcement. Threat Explorer also provides details about threat families, global threats, top targeted users, and links to security analyst reports on malware families that summarize the threat scenario, using Microsoft 365 Threat Explorer to investigate a malware threat. Suppose you want to investigate a malware threat. Here are some examples of how you can use Threat Explorer. Drill down into the history of a threat. You can filter on options like sender email, recipient email, sender IP address, and the detection technology used to stop a threat. For example, you can determine whether an email was blocked by Microsoft Defender for Office 365 or through an Exchange Online Protection filter. Get information about malware family behavior, a definition of the threat, technical details, with a link to an associated analyst report, global details, to see how a threat has affected the global Microsoft 365 network, specific nations and industries, and your own organization, and advanced analysis, with more details on how the threat is affecting your organization. See each instance where a user in an organization got an attachment with a specific malware threat. See if an email was caught and blocked before it reached the user, or if it was delivered as spam. Provide insight into suspicious activity using Microsoft Cloud App Security. Microsoft Cloud App Security provides insight into suspicious activity in Microsoft 365. This information gives organizations enhanced visibility and control over your Microsoft 365 tenant. Cloud App Security consists of 3 core areas. Threat detection. Cloud App Security enables organizations to identify high-risk and abnormal usage, security incidents, and potential threats in their environment. For example, if you have an administrator who is doing something that admins normally don't do, such as forwarding mail to different people, Cloud App Security alerts you so that you can investigate those actions. Enhanced control. Cloud App Security lets organizations monitor activities by providing granular controls and policies. For example, if someone completes a mass download of information, you can be alerted to it so that you can take appropriate action. Discovery and insights. Cloud App Security provides insight into the variety of cloud apps people in your organization are using. This insight enables you to see which apps are being used and whether they're approved for use in your organization. Moving to the cloud increases flexibility for employees and IT alike. However, it also introduces new challenges and complexities for keeping your organization secure. To get the full benefit of cloud apps and services, an IT team must find the right balance of supporting access while maintaining control to protect critical data. Microsoft Cloud App Security supports various deployment modes including log collection, API connectors, and reverse proxy. It provides rich visibility, control over data travel, and sophisticated analytics to identify and combat cyber threats across all your Microsoft and third-party cloud services. Microsoft Cloud App Security natively integrates with leading Microsoft solutions and is designed with security professionals in mind. Additional reading. For information about licensing, see the Microsoft Cloud App Security Licensing Datasheet. The Cloud App Security Framework. Cloud App Security provides the following functionality. Discover and control the use of shadow IT. Identify the cloud apps, IaaS, and PaaS services used by your organization. Investigate usage patterns, assess the risk levels and business readiness of more than 16,000 SaaS apps against more than 80 risks. Start managing them to ensure security and compliance. Protect your sensitive information anywhere in the cloud. Understand, classify, and protect the exposure of sensitive information at rest. Use out-of-the-box policies and automated processes to apply controls in real time across all your cloud apps. Protect against cyber threats and anomalies. Detect unusual behavior across cloud apps to identify ransomware, compromised users or rogue applications, analyze high-risk usage, and remediate automatically to limit the risk to your organization. Assess the compliance of your cloud apps. Assess if your cloud apps meet relevant compliance requirements including regulatory compliance and industry standards. Prevent data leaks to non-compliant apps, and limit access to regulated data. Cloud App Security integrates visibility with your cloud by using Cloud Discovery to map and identify your cloud environment and the cloud apps your organization is using. Sanctioning and unsanctioning apps in your cloud. Using easy-to-deploy app connectors that take advantage of provider APIs for visibility and governance of apps that you connect to. Using conditional access app control protection to get real-time visibility and control over access and activities within your cloud apps. Helping you have continuous control by setting and then continually fine-tuning policies. Graphic shows overview of Cloud App Security. Additional reading. For more information, see what is Cloud App Security. Summary. This module introduced you to several features in Microsoft 365 that can help protect your organization against cyber threats, detect when a user or computer has been compromised, and monitor your organization for suspicious activities. The feature areas that were discussed in this training included: Exchange Online Protection, Microsoft Defender for Office 365, formerly Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection, Microsoft 365 Threat Intelligence, Auditing and Alerts, Advanced Security Management. This module provided a high-level overview of each of these areas. You learned about the three key Microsoft Defender products. Microsoft Defender for Office 365, which enhances email security in a Microsoft 365 deployment. Microsoft Defender for Identity, which identifies, detects, and investigates advanced threats, compromised identities, and malicious insider actions directed at your organization. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, which helps enterprise networks prevent, detect, investigate, and respond to advanced threats. Along with the Microsoft Defender products, this module examined how Microsoft 365 Threat Intelligence can be beneficial to your organization's security officers and administrators. You also learned how Microsoft Cloud App Security enhances visibility and control over your Microsoft 365 tenant. Examine Microsoft Secure Score. This module examines how Microsoft Secure Score helps organizations understand what they have done to reduce the risk to their data and show them what they can do to further reduce that risk. Learning objectives. By the end of this module, you will be able to describe the benefits of Secure Score and what kind of services can be analyzed. Describe how to collect data using the Secure Score API. Describe how to use the tool to identify gaps between your current state and where you would like to be regarding security. Identify actions that will increase your security by mitigating risks. Explain where to look to determine the threats each action will mitigate and the impact it has on users. Introduction. Microsoft Secure Score is a security analytics tool designed to help organizations understand what they've done to reduce the risk to their data and show them what they can do to further reduce that risk. Secure Score determines what Microsoft 365 services an organization is using. It then looks at its configuration and behaviors and compares it to a baseline that's configured by Microsoft. Rather than reacting or responding to security alerts, the Secure Score tool enables organizations to track and plan incremental improvements over a longer period of time. In this module, you'll be introduced to the Microsoft Secure Score tool and its benefits. After completing this module, you'll be able to describe the benefits of Secure Score and what kind of services can be analyzed. Describe how to collect data using the Secure Score API. Describe how to use the tool to identify gaps between your current state and where you would like to be regarding security. Identify actions that will increase your security by mitigating risks. Explain where to look to determine the threats each action will mitigate and the impact it has on users. Explore Microsoft Secure Score. Microsoft Secure Score is a measurement of an organization's security posture. The higher the score, the more improvement actions have been taken. Organizations that implement the security score recommendations can protect themselves from threats. From a centralized dashboard in the Microsoft 365 Security Center, organizations can monitor and work on the security of their Microsoft 365 identities, data, apps, devices, and infrastructure. Microsoft Secure Score helps organizations report on the current state of their security posture, improve their security posture by providing discoverability, visibility, guidance, and control, compare with benchmarks and establish key performance indicators, KPIs. By implementing Microsoft Secure Score, organizations gain access to robust visualizations of metrics and trends, integration with other Microsoft products, score comparison with similar organizations, and much more. The score can also reflect when third-party solutions have addressed recommended actions. Important. Microsoft Secure Score is a numerical summary of your security posture based on system configurations, user behavior, and other security-related measurements. It's not an absolute measurement of how likely your system or data will be breached. Rather, it represents the extent to which you have adopted security controls in your Microsoft 365 environment that can help offset the risk of being breached. No online service is immune from security breaches. Secure Score shouldn't be interpreted as a guarantee against security breach in any manner. Microsoft Secure Score is available directly from the Microsoft 365 Security Console, as seen in the following image. How Secure Score works. An organization receives points for configuring recommended security features, completing security-related tasks, such as viewing reports, or addressing the improvement action with a third-party application or software. Some improvement actions only give points when fully completed, and some give partial points if they're completed for certain devices or users. Microsoft Secure Score displays the full set of possible improvements, regardless of license, so you can understand security best practices and improve your score. Your absolute security posture is represented by Secure Score, which stays the same no matter what product licenses your organization owns. Keep in mind that security should be balanced with usability, and not every recommendation can work for your environment. Your score is updated in real time to reflect the information presented in the visualizations and improvement action pages. Secure Score also syncs daily to receive system data about your achieved points for each action. How improvement actions are scored. Most improvements are scored in a binary fashion. If you implement the improvement action, such as creating a new policy or turning on a specific setting, you get 100% of the points. For other improvement actions, points are given as a percentage of the total configuration. For example, if the improvement action states you get 30 points by protecting all your users with multi-factor authentication, and you only have 5 of 100 total users protected, you would be given a partial score of around 2 points. 5 protected / 100 total * 30 max points equals 2 points partial score. Products included in Secure Score. Secure Score currently includes recommendations for Microsoft 365, including SharePoint Online, Exchange Online, OneDrive for Business, Microsoft Information Protection and more, Azure AD and Cloud App Security. Recommendations for other security products, such as Microsoft Defender for Identity, formerly Azure ATP, and Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, formerly Microsoft Defender ATP, are coming soon. The recommendations won't cover all the attack surfaces associated with each product, but they're a good baseline. You can also mark the improvement actions as covered by a third party. Examine the Secure Score dashboard. Microsoft Secure Score is a web-based tool that analyzes an organization's Microsoft 365 security based on security settings across the tenant, assigns a score that can be tracked over time, creates a roadmap of recommended actions, ranked by priority, to help an organization mitigate security risks. Like a credit score, the Secure Score framework is based on a score relative to what features have been enabled by the organization, what features are available in the service, what the risks might look like. The Microsoft Secure Score console enables you to select various tabs to display Secure Score data. The following sections describe each of these tabs. Dashboard tab. Organizations are assigned points for various aspects of their security framework. These points are accumulated into a final total, which is referred to as the organization's Secure Score. Microsoft 365 Global Administrators can access Microsoft Secure Score, which initially displays the Dashboard tab. This tab provides a summarized view into an organization's security posture. Overview tab. The Secure Score tool provides organizations with an action roadmap. This roadmap lists tasks that an organization can complete to reduce security risks. To help you quickly find the information you need, the actions are organized into the following groups in the Overview tab. Identity. Displays Azure AD accounts and roles. Data. Displays Microsoft Information Protection. Device. Doesn't currently display improvement actions. App displays email and cloud apps, including Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Cloud App Security. Infrastructure. Doesn't currently display improvement actions. In the Microsoft Secure Score Overview tab, you can see how points are split between these groups and what points are available. The Overview tab is also the place to get an all-up view of the organization's total secure score. This tab also displays the historical trend of an organization's secure score with benchmark comparisons and improvement actions that can be taken to improve its score. The actions are ranked by priority. Improvement Actions tab. The Improvement Actions tab lists the security recommendations that address possible attack surfaces. It also displays the status of each action: completed, not completed, resolved through third party, and ignored. You can search, filter, and group all the improvement actions. Ranking. The Improvement Actions tab ranks each improvement action. The ranking assigned to each action is based on the remaining points left to achieve for that action, implementation difficulty, user impact, complexity of the action. The highest ranked improvement actions have a large number of points remaining with low difficulty, user impact, and complexity. Actions. The Improvement Actions tab displays the actions recommended by the Secure Score tool. Actions labeled as not scored aren't tracked by Microsoft Secure Score. You can still complete the suggested action, but completing them won't affect your score. If an action becomes tracked by Microsoft Secure Score in the future, and you've already completed it, your Secure Score will automatically reflect the change. When you select a specific improvement action, a flyout window appears. You can select one of the following options related to the action. View Settings. Select this option when you want to complete the action. This option takes you to the configuration screen, where you can make the recommended change. You then gain the points that the action is worth, which is visible at the top of the flyout. Points may take up to 24 hours to update. Resolved through third party. Select this option when the improvement action has already been addressed by a third-party application or software. You gain the points that the action is worth, so your secure score better reflects your overall security posture. If a third party no longer covers the control, you can mark the improvement action as not complete. Keep in mind, Microsoft has no visibility into whether the score requirements have been met if the improvement action is marked as resolved through third party. Ignore. Select this option when you've decided to accept the risk and not enact the improvement action. Once you ignore an improvement action, the total number of secure score points you can achieve is reduced. You can view this action in history or undo it at any time. Review. Select this option if the improvement action requires you to regularly review a part of your environment to gain and keep points. For example, mailbox forwarding rules should be reviewed on a weekly basis to ensure data isn't being stolen from your network. You don't need to make any changes, but an action must be performed. If you regularly review the rules, you'll receive the points. If you don't regularly review the rules, the score is reduced. History tab. The History tab displays a graph of your organization's secure score over time. Below the graph is a list of all the actions taken in the selected time range, and their attributes, such as resulting points and category. You can customize a date range and filter by category. Collect secure score data using the Secure Score API. Besides the web-based Secure Score tool, there's also a Secure Score API that's fully integrated into the Microsoft Graph. This Secure Score API enables you to customize where you want to view a dashboard of your organization's secure score and all pertinent information. Potential benefits of collecting secure score data through Microsoft Graph include the following scenarios. Monitor and report on your secure score in downstream reporting tools. Track your security configuration baseline. Integrate the data into compliance or cybersecurity insurance applications. Integrate secure score data into your security incident and event management (SIEM) or cloud access security broker (CASB) solutions to drive a hybrid or multi-cloud framework for security analytics. Once the Secure Score API has been set up, PowerShell scripts are used to retrieve the necessary data from Secure Score. The Get Secure Score API PowerShell command, along with scripts that can be written using this command, enable you to feed data into a Power BI dashboard. Conduct advanced analytics. Quickly generate a historical view of the last 30 days of Secure Score data. Note: the Secure Score API and its related PowerShell templates are outside the scope of this training. For more information, see using the Office 365 Secure Score API. Improve your security posture. The Secure Score tool determines the current state of your organization's security posture and identifies the risks within your organization. Once you've run the tool and received this information, the next step is to analyze your findings and plan how to improve your condition. During this planning process, you should consider the potential for risk, the difficulty of implementing proposed solutions, the time frames for implementation, the impact to your rating based on each Microsoft 365 Secure Score action. Based on a combination of these factors, you should rank your goals in order of priority. Doing so will result in your roadmap to a safer, more secure environment. Important: planning and implementation should involve all the key stakeholders in your organization, including the Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, the IT Security Manager, and the administrators who manage Active Directory, Exchange, networking, and so on. Design your security upgrade plan. Every organization is going to have different success criteria. Some organizations want to achieve the maximum target score, while others are satisfied to be somewhere in the middle. Some organizations may prefer to address just their top 5 items, while others only focus on the items that require the least amount of effort. As you can see, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Every organization must determine where they want to be and what they're willing to do to get there. That being said, there are some common approaches that many companies start with when designing their security upgrade plan. For example, unless the tenant is in a high-risk industry such as finance or government, a common approach is to begin by implementing actions that have the lowest impact on user productivity, while providing immediate gains. Examples of these actions include enabling multi-factor authentication on all admin accounts, assigning the global admin role to more than one user, enabling auditing across workloads, enabling mailbox auditing, having a weekly review of user sign-in attempts after multiple failures, having a weekly review of user sign-in attempts from unknown sources, having a weekly review of user sign-in attempts from multiple geographies. Priorities will differ from one organization to another. For example, organizations in the finance and healthcare sectors, who are subject to industry regulations, may decide on a more aggressive timeline. As such, they may implement solutions such as data loss prevention and information rights management, which have more impact on users and take longer to implement. Tip: it's recommended that you assign a sponsor to help set up meetings, remove roadblocks, and ensure teams stay on schedule. Finally, using the Secure Score tool to identify potential risks and create a roadmap to mitigate those risks shouldn't be a one-time project. Changes will likely occur over time that affect your state of security, including the addition of new administrators and users, new regulations, and new services and features across Microsoft 365. Periodically running Secure Score every 6 months or so provides the insight needed to mitigate any risks associated with those changes. Summary: this module examined how Microsoft Secure Score is a security analytics tool designed to help organizations understand what they've done to reduce the risk to their data and show them what they can do to further reduce that risk. Secure Score determines what Microsoft 365 services an organization is using. It then looks at its configuration and behaviors and compares it to a baseline that's configured by Microsoft. In this module, you learned that rather than reacting or responding to security alerts, the Secure Score tool enables organizations to track and plan incremental improvements over a longer period of time. You were introduced to the Microsoft Secure Score tool and its benefits. This module examined the benefits of Secure Score and what kind of services can be analyzed. You were introduced to how the Secure Score API collects data. This module also explored how to use the Secure Score tool to identify gaps between your current state and where you would like to be concerning security. Having completed this module, you should know where to identify actions that will increase your security by mitigating risks. Finally, you learned where to look to determine the threats each action will mitigate and the impact it has on users. Examine privileged identity management. This module examines how privileged identity management ensures users in your organization have just the right privileges to perform the tasks they need to accomplish. Learning objectives. By the end of this module, you will be able to describe how privileged identity management enables you to manage, control, and monitor access to important resources in your organization. Configure privileged identity management for use in your organization. Describe how privileged identity management audit history enables you to see all the user assignments and activations within a given time period for all privileged roles. Explain how Microsoft Identity Manager helps organizations manage the users, credentials, policies, and access within their organizations in hybrid environments. Explain how privileged access management provides granular access control over privileged admin tasks in Microsoft 365. Introduction. Identity management is the process of ensuring users in your organization have just the right privileges to complete the tasks they need to accomplish. The goal of privileged identity management, PIM, is to avoid assigning excessive privileges to users. Failure to do so may lead to exploitation of privileges, resulting in users who can do tasks that are above their grade. Privileged identity management is an Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, service that enables you to manage, control, and monitor access to important resources in your organization. These include resources such as Azure AD, Azure, Microsoft 365, and Microsoft Intune. In this module, you'll examine how PIM enables organizations to minimize the number of people who have access to secure information or resources. By doing so, PIM reduces the chance of a malicious actor getting that access, or an authorized user inadvertently impacting a sensitive resource. However, users still must carry out privileged operations in Azure AD, Azure, Microsoft 365, or SaaS apps. Organizations can give users just-in-time privileged access to Azure resources and Azure AD. There is a need for oversight for what those users are doing with their administrator privileges. After completing this module, you'll be able to describe how privileged identity management enables you to manage, control, and monitor access to important resources in your organization. Configure privileged identity management for use in your organization. Describe how privileged identity management audit history enables you to see all the user assignments and activations within a given time period for all privileged roles. Explain how Microsoft Identity Manager helps organizations manage the users, credentials, policies, and access within their organizations in hybrid environments. Explain how privileged access management provides granular access control over privileged admin tasks in Microsoft 365. Explore privileged identity management in Azure AD. Azure AD Privileged Identity Management, PIM, enables you to manage, control, and monitor access to resources within your organization. These resources include objects in Azure AD, Azure Resources, and other Microsoft Online services like Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Intune. This ability to control resources doesn't eliminate the need for users to carry out privileged operations in Azure AD, Azure, Microsoft 365, and Software as a Service, SaaS, apps. Organizations can give users just-in-time, JIT, privileged access to Azure resources and Azure AD. Oversight is needed for what those users do with their administrator privileges. PIM helps mitigate the risk of excessive, unnecessary, or misused access rights. Some of the key features of PIM include providing just-in-time privileged access to Azure AD and Azure resources, assigning time-bound access to resources by using start and end dates, requiring approval to activate privileged roles, enforcing Azure AD multi-factor authentication (MFA) to activate any role, using justification to understand why users activate, getting notifications when privileged roles are activated, conducting access reviews to ensure that users still need roles, downloading an audit history for an internal or external audit, just-in-time administrator access. Historically, you could assign a user to an admin role through the Azure portal, other Microsoft Online Services portals, or the Azure AD templates in Windows PowerShell. As a result, that user became a permanent admin, always active in the assigned role. Along with permanent admins, the Azure AD Privileged Identity Management PIM service introduces the concept of an eligible admin. Eligible admins are users that need privileged access periodically, but not all day, every day. The role is inactive until the user needs access. At that point, the user must complete an activation process and become an active admin for a predetermined amount of time. More organizations are choosing to use this approach to reduce or eliminate standing admin access to privileged roles. Implementing PIM. Privileged identity management is set up so that users are eligible for privileged roles. The following steps provide a summarized view of the workflow involved in implementing PIM. Organizations must decide which roles to protect with PIM. Eligible users must be assigned to the roles protected by PIM. When an eligible user needs to use their privileged role, they activate the role in PIM. Depending on the PIM settings configured for the role, the user can be required to use multi-factor authentication, request approval for activation, provide a business reason for activation. Once the user successfully activates their role, they'll get the role for a pre-configured time period. Administrators can view a history of all PIM activities in the audit log. They can also further secure their Azure AD organizations and meet compliance using PIM features like access reviews and alerts. To use PIM, you need one of the following paid or trial licenses: Azure AD Premium P2, Enterprise Mobility Plus Security, EMS E5. Roles that can be managed by PIM. There are two types of roles that can be managed by PIM. Azure AD roles. These roles are all in Azure Active Directory, such as Global Administrator, Exchange Administrator, and Security Administrator. You can read more about the roles and their functionality in Administrator Role Permissions in Azure Active Directory. For help with determining which roles to assign your administrators, see Least Privileged Roles by Task. Azure Roles. These roles are linked to an Azure resource group, subscription, or management group. You can use PIM to provide just-in-time access to built-in Azure roles like Owner, User Access Administrator, and Contributor, and also to custom roles. For more information about Azure roles, see Azure Role-Based Access Control. Additional reading. For more information, see the following resources. License requirements to use privileged identity management. Built-in roles for Azure resources. Assign Azure AD roles in privileged identity management. Activate my Azure AD roles in PIM. Configure privileged identity management. The first person to use PIM in an organization's instance of Azure AD is automatically assigned the Microsoft 365 Security Administrator role and the Privileged Role Administrator role. This person must be an eligible Azure AD user. Only privileged role administrators can manage the Azure AD directory role assignments of users. Organizations can also choose to use the Discovery and Insights tool to walk them through the initial discovery and assignment experience. Users or members of a group assigned to the Owner or User Access Administrator roles and global administrators that enable subscription management in Azure AD are resource administrators. These administrators can assign roles, configure role settings, and review access by using PIM for Azure resources. Discovery and Insights for Azure AD roles. If you're starting out with Privileged Identity Management, PIM, in your Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, organization, you can use the Discovery and Insights tool to get started. This feature shows you who's assigned to privileged roles in your organization and how to use PIM to quickly change permanent role assignments into just-in-time assignments. You can view or make changes to your permanent privileged role assignments in Discovery and Insights. It's an analysis tool and an action tool. Before your organization starts using privileged identity management, all role assignments are permanent. Users are always in their assigned roles even when they don't need their privileges. The Discovery and Insights tool, which replaces the former Security Wizard, shows you a list of privileged roles and how many users are currently in those roles. You can display assignments for a role to learn more about the assigned users if one or more of them are unfamiliar. It's recommended that you keep 2 break glass accounts that are permanently assigned to the global administrator role. Ensure these accounts don't require the same multi-factor authentication mechanism as your normal administrative accounts to sign in. Also, keep role assignments permanent if a user has a Microsoft account, in other words, an account they use to sign into Microsoft services like Skype or Outlook.com. If you require multi-factor authentication for a user with a Microsoft account to activate a role assignment, the user will be locked out. PIM setup. Organizations should complete the following steps to set up PIM. 1. Discover Azure resources. When you first set up PIM for Azure resources, you must discover and select the resources to protect with privileged identity management. There's no limit to the number of resources that you can manage with privileged identity management. However, we recommend starting with your most critical production resources. 2. Grant access to other personnel to manage PIM. To delegate access to PIM, a global administrator can assign other users to the privileged role administrator role. By default, security administrators and security readers have read-only access to privileged identity management. To grant access to privileged identity management, the first user can assign others to the privileged role administrator role. The privileged role administrator role is required for managing Azure AD roles only. Privileged role administrator permissions aren't required to manage settings for Azure resources. 3. Elevate access for a global administrator. This step enables you to view all resources and assign access in any subscription or management group in the directory. When you elevate your access, you'll be assigned the User Access Administrator role in Azure. This role enables you to view all resources and assign access in any subscription or management group in the directory. Workflow notifications. The following steps provide a high-level summary of the workflow notification process. Approvers are notified by email when a request for a role is pending their review. Email notifications include a direct link to the request, where the approver can approve or deny. Requests are resolved by the first approver who approves or denies. When an approver responds to the request, all approvers are notified of the action. Global admins and privileged role admins are notified when an approved user becomes active in their role. Note: a global admin or privileged role admin who believes that an approved user shouldn't be active can remove the active role assignment in privileged identity management. Although administrators aren't notified of pending requests unless they're an approver, they can view and cancel any pending requests for all users by viewing pending requests in privileged identity management. Audit privileged identity management. With Azure AD Privileged Identity Management, you can view activity, activations, and audit history for Azure resources within your organization. These Azure resources include subscriptions, resource groups, and even virtual machines. Any resource within the Azure portal that uses Azure role-based access control functionality can take advantage of the security and lifecycle management capabilities in PIM. Note: if an organization has outsourced management functions to a service provider who uses Azure Delegated Resource Management, role assignments authorized by that service provider won't be shown here. Additional reading. For more information, see the following article on Azure Active Directory reports. View activity and activations. To see what actions a specific user took in various resources, you can view the Azure resource activity that's associated with a given activation period. 1. Open Azure AD Privileged Identity Management. 2. Select Azure Resources. 3. Select the resource you want to view activity and activations for. 4. Select roles or members. 5. Select a user to display a summary of the user's actions in Azure Resources by date. It also shows the recent role activations over that same time period. 6. Select a specific role activation to see details and corresponding Azure resource activity that occurred while that user was active. Navigate to Audit History. From the Azure Portal dashboard, select the Azure AD Privileged Identity Management app. From there, access the audit history by selecting Manage Privileged Roles Audit History in the PIM dashboard. Resource audit gives you a view of all role activity for a resource. 1. Open Azure AD Privileged Identity Management. 2. Select Azure Resources. 3. Select the resource you want to view audit history for. 4. Select Resource Audit. 5. Filter the history using a predefined date or custom range. 6. For audit type, select Activate, Assigned plus Activated. 7. Under Action, select Activity, for a user to see that user's activity detail in Azure Resources. You can use the audit history to view the total activations, max activations per day, and average activations per day in a line graph. You can also filter the data by role if there's more than one role in the audit history. Export role assignments with child resources. An organization may have a compliance requirement where it must provide a complete list of role assignments to auditors. PIM enables you to query role assignments at a specific resource, which includes role assignments for all child resources. Previously, it was difficult for administrators to get a complete list of role assignments for a subscription, and they had to export role assignments for each specific resource. Using Privileged Identity Management, you can query for all active and eligible role assignments in a subscription, including role assignments for all resource groups and resources. 1. Open Azure AD Privileged Identity Management. 2. Select Azure Resources. 3. Select the resource you want to export role assignments for, such as a subscription. 4. Select Members. 5. Select Export to open the Export Membership pane. 6. Select Export All Members to export all role assignments in a CSV file. Explore Microsoft Identity Manager. Microsoft Identity Manager, MIM, helps organizations manage the users, credentials, policies, and access within their organizations in hybrid environments. With MIM, organizations can simplify identity lifecycle management with automated workflows, business rules, integration with heterogeneous platforms across the data center. MIM enables Active Directory to have the right users and access rights for on-premises apps. Azure AD Connect can then make those users and permissions available in Azure AD for Microsoft 365 and cloud-hosted apps. On-premises Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, or a hybrid combination of the two offer services for user and device authentication, identity and role management, and provisioning. Common MIM scenarios include automatic identity and group provisioning based on business policy, and workflow-driven provisioning. Integration of the contents of directories with HR systems and other sources of authority. Synchronizing identities between directories, databases, and on-premises applications through common APIs and protocols, Microsoft-delivered connectors, and partner-delivered connectors. Identity has become the common factor among many services, like Microsoft 365 and Xbox Live, where the person is the center of the service. Identity is now the security boundary, the new firewall, the control plane, whichever comparison you prefer. Your digital identity is the combination of your credentials and what you're allowed to do. In other words, credentials plus privileges equals digital identity. MIM enables organizations to protect its privileged accounts. These identities have more than the normal user rights and, if compromised, allow a malicious hacker to access sensitive corporate assets. Helping secure these privileged identities is a critical step to establishing security assurances for business assets in a modern organization. Cybercriminals target these accounts and other privileged services in their kill chain to carry out their goals. Within Microsoft 365, Azure AD Privileged Identity Management, PIM, is recommended as the service to help protect your privileged accounts. Evolution of identities. The following diagram displays the evolution of identity authentication. Organizations should complete the following steps to prepare for a passwordless world. Enforce MFA. Conform to the Fast Identity Online (FIDO) 2.0 standard. Doing so enables organizations to require a PIN and a biometric for authentication rather than a password. Windows Hello is one good example, but choose the MFA method that works for your organization. Reduce legacy authentication workflows. Place apps that require passwords into a separate user access portal and migrate users to modern authentication flows most of the time. For example, only 10% of Microsoft's users enter a password on a given day. Remove passwords. Create consistency across Active Directory and Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, to enable administrators to remove passwords from Identity Directory. Control privileged admin tasks using Privileged Access Management. Privileged Access Management (PAM) allows granular access control over privileged admin tasks in Microsoft 365. It can help protect your organization from breaches that may use existing privileged admin accounts with standing access to sensitive data or access to critical configuration settings. After enabling PAM, users must request just-in-time access to complete elevated and privileged tasks through an approval workflow that is highly scoped and time-bound. This process gives users just enough access to complete the task at hand, without risking exposure of sensitive data or critical configuration settings. By enabling PAM in Microsoft 365, organizations can operate with zero standing privileges. This design provides a layer of defense against vulnerabilities arising because of such standing administrative access. Layers of protection. Privileged access management complements other data and access feature protections within the Microsoft 365 security architecture. By enabling PAM as part of an integrated approach to security and protecting your organization, a layered security model can be used to maximize protection of sensitive information and Microsoft 365 configuration settings. The following diagram illustrates how PAM builds on the protection provided with native encryption of Microsoft 365 data and the role-based access control security model of Microsoft 365 services. When used with Azure AD Privileged Identity Management, these two features provide access control with just-in-time access at different scopes. Privileged Access Management in Microsoft 365 and Azure AD Privileged Identity Management offer different levels of protection. Privileged Access Management in Microsoft 365 can be defined and scoped at the task level. In comparison, Azure AD Privileged Identity Management applies protection at the role level with the ability to execute multiple tasks. PIM primarily allows access management for AD roles and role groups. In comparison, PAM is applied only at the task level. Privileged Access Management Process Flow. Each of the following process flows outline the architecture of privileged access and how it interacts with the Microsoft 365 substrate, Microsoft 365 auditing, and the Exchange Management Runspace. Step 1. Configure a privileged access policy. When you configure a privileged access policy with the Microsoft 365 Admin Center or the Exchange Management PowerShell, you define the policy and the privileged access feature processes and the policy attributes in the Microsoft 365 substrate. The activities are logged in the Microsoft 365 Security and Compliance Center. The policy is now enabled and ready to handle incoming requests for approvals. Step 2. Access Request. In the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, or with the Exchange Management PowerShell, users can request access to elevated or privileged tasks. The privileged access feature sends the request to the Microsoft 365 substrate for processing against the configured privilege access policy and records the activity in the Microsoft 365 Security and Compliance Center logs. Step 3. Access Approval. An approval request is generated and the pending request notification is emailed to approvers. If the request is approved, the privileged access request is processed as an approval and the task is ready to be completed. If the request is denied, the task is blocked and no access is granted to the requester. The requester is notified of the request approval or denial via email message. Step 4. Access Processing. For an approved request, the task is processed by the Exchange Management Runspace. The approval is checked against the privileged access policy and processed by the Microsoft 365 substrate. All activity for the task is logged in the Microsoft 365 Security and Compliance Center. Summary. This module examined identity management, which is the process of ensuring users in your organization have just the right privileges to complete the tasks they need to accomplish. The goal of Privileged Identity Management (PIM) is to avoid assigning excessive privileges to users. Failure to do so may lead to exploitation of privileges, which results in users who can do tasks that are above their grade. Privileged Identity Management is an Azure Active Directory (Azure AD) service that enables you to manage, control, and monitor access to important resources in your organization. These include resources such as Azure AD, Azure, Microsoft 365, and Microsoft Intune. In this module, you examined how PIM enables organizations to minimize the number of people who have access to secure information or resources. By doing so, PIM reduces the chance of a malicious actor getting that access, or an authorized user inadvertently impacting a sensitive resource. You also learned how PIM enables you to manage, control, and monitor access to important resources in your organization. You learned that because users still must carry out privileged operations, organizations can give users just-in-time privileged access to Azure resources and Azure AD. There's a need for oversight for what those users are doing with their administrator privileges. This module explored how PIM Audit History enables you to see all the user assignments and activations within a given time period for all privileged roles. Besides PIM, this module also examined Microsoft Identity Manager and Privileged Access Management. Identity Manager helps organizations manage the users, credentials, policies, and access within their organizations in hybrid environments. You also learned how Privileged Access Management provides granular access control over privileged admin tasks in Microsoft 365. Examine Azure Identity Protection. This module examines how Azure Identity Protection provides organizations the same protection systems used by Microsoft to secure identities. Learning objectives. By the end of this module, you will be able to describe Azure Identity Protection (AIP) and what kind of identities can be protected. Enable the 3 default protection policies in AIP. Identify the vulnerabilities and risk events detected by AIP. Plan your investigation in protecting cloud-based identities. Plan how to protect your Azure Active Directory environment from security breaches. Introduction. Microsoft has secured cloud-based identities for more than a decade. By implementing Azure Active Directory Identity Protection, otherwise known as Azure Identity Protection (AIP), you can use the same protection systems Microsoft uses to secure identities. Most security breaches take place when attackers gain access to an environment by stealing a user's identity. Over the years, attackers have become increasingly effective in using third-party breaches and sophisticated phishing attacks. As soon as attackers gain access to even low-privileged user accounts, it's relatively easy for them to gain access to important company resources through lateral movement. Discovering compromised identities is no easy task. Azure Active Directory uses adaptive machine learning algorithms and heuristics to detect anomalies and suspicious incidents that indicate potentially compromised identities. Using this data, Identity Protection generates reports and alerts that enable you to evaluate the detected issues and take appropriate mitigation or remediation actions. After completing this module, you'll be able to describe Azure Identity Protection and what kind of identities can be protected. Understand how to enable Azure Identity Protection. Know how to identify vulnerabilities and risk events. Plan your investigation in protecting cloud-based identities and how to protect your Azure Active Directory environment from security breaches. Explore Azure Identity Protection. Azure Active Directory Identity Protection, which is also known as Azure Identity Protection, is a cloud-based solution that helps an organization monitor and report compromised or abused identities within its environment. Monitoring and reporting in Azure Identity Protection can be done automatically by administrators. They can define rules and conditions manually by users, or a combination where users are given recommendations. Azure AD Identity Protection offers protection to organizations by detecting attacks in near real time. It informs them of risks and applies controls to keep their enterprises safe. Most security breaches occur when attackers gain access to an environment by stealing a user's identity. Over the years, attackers have become increasingly effective in using third-party breaches and sophisticated phishing attacks. As soon as attackers gain access to even low-privileged user accounts, it's relatively easy for them to gain access to important company resources through lateral movement. As a result, it's imperative that enterprise administrators protect all identities, regardless of their privilege level. Proactively prevent compromised identities from being abused. Discovering compromised identities is no easy task. Azure Active Directory uses adaptive machine learning algorithms and heuristics to detect anomalies and suspicious incidents that indicate potentially compromised identities. Azure Identity Protection uses this data to generate reports and alerts that enable organizations to evaluate the detected issues and take appropriate mitigation or remediation actions. Azure Identity Protection is more than a monitoring and reporting tool. It can enable organizations to protect their identities by configuring risk-based policies that automatically respond to detected issues when a specified risk level has been reached. These policies, along with other conditional access controls provided by Azure Active Directory and Enterprise Mobility Plus Security (EMS), can either automatically block or start adaptive remediation actions, including password resets and multi-factor authentication enforcement. The following graphic shows that Azure Identity Protection is a technology inside Azure Active Directory that recognizes malicious activity and calculates risks based on the user activity. Azure Identity Protection capabilities. Microsoft detects more than 10,000 attacker-controlled IP addresses per day. It also detects and blocks more than 10 million bogus sign-in attempts per day, resulting in 1.5 million newly protected credential pairs every day. This protection results in world-class signal and battle-tested algorithms that organizations can use to protect their identity infrastructure. This information is also the basis for the following capabilities that Azure Identity Protection provides organizations. Detecting vulnerabilities and risky accounts. Azure Identity Protection uses all this data, analysis, and experience to generate user and sign-in risk scores. It can then notify an organization of the compromised users, risky logons, and configuration vulnerabilities in its environment before they can be exploited by cyber criminals. Investigating risk events. Azure Identity Protection helps organizations to better protect themselves by providing a combined view into risks, remediation recommendations, and inline response options. It uses advanced machine learning to detect suspicious activities based on signals including brute force attacks, leaked credentials, sign-in from unfamiliar locations, and infected devices. Risk-based conditional access policies. Azure AD Identity Protection can be configured to trigger risk-based conditional access policies that automatically respond to threats by blocking sign-in attempts, issuing Azure Active Directory multi-factor authentication challenges, or if the evidence is strong enough, requiring users to change their credentials. For example, if Azure Identity Protection's machine learning system believes that a sign-in is coming from a new, anonymized, or bot-controlled network location, conditional access auto-remediation can intercept the request with an adaptive two-factor challenge. When Azure Identity Protection's threat intelligence or advanced machine learning algorithms indicate that a user's credentials are compromised, the risk-based conditional access policies can be triggered. These policies can offer either automatic remediation in the form of blocking the account or, with multi-factor authentication, require a user-initiated password change. Azure Identity Protection also helps organizations identify and remediate configuration vulnerabilities. It can then integrate with Azure AD Privileged Identity Management, Cloud App Discovery, and multi-factor authentication to improve their security posture. Azure AD Identity Protection also can detect suspicious activity to include impossible sign-in attempts, such as signing on in New York and then in Sydney, Australia 3 hours later. Azure Identity Protection roles. You can assign several roles to load balance the management activities around your Azure Identity Protection implementation. Azure Identity Protection supports the following directory roles. Role: Global Administrator. Can do: full access to identity protection, onboard identity protection. Can't do: nothing. Role: Security Administrator. Can do: full access to identity protection. Can't do: onboard identity protection, reset passwords for a user. Role, security reader. Can do, read only to identity protection. Can't do, onboard identity protection, remediate users, configure policies, reset passwords. Risk detection through Azure Identity Protection. Azure AD uses machine learning to detect anomalies and suspicious activity, using both signals detected in real time during sign-in attempts and non-real-time signals related to users and their sign-in activities. Using this data, Azure Identity Protection calculates a real-time sign-in risk each time a user authenticates and determines an overall risk level for each user. Azure Identity Protection enables you to automatically take action on these risk detections by configuring user risk policies and sign-in risk policies. Azure Identity Protection detects the following types of risk. Sign-in risk. Sign-in risk reflects the probability that a given authentication request isn't authorized by the identity owner. There are two types of sign-in risks. Real-time. Real-time sign-in risk is detected at the time of the given sign-in attempt, such as sign-in attempts from anonymous IP addresses. Total. Total sign-in risk is the aggregate of detected real-time sign-in risks and any later non-real-time risk events associated with the user's sign-in attempts, such as impossible travel. User risk. User risk reflects the overall likelihood that a bad actor has compromised a given identity. User risk contains all the risk activities for a given user, including real-time sign-in risk, later sign-in risk, risky user detections. Enable the default protection policies in AIP. By enabling Azure Active Directory Identity Protection, organizations can get a combined view of flagged users and risk events that were detected using machine learning algorithms. Implement risk-based conditional access policies to automatically protect its users. Improve their security posture by acting on vulnerabilities proactively rather than just acting after cyber attacks have occurred. Azure Active Directory Identity Protection includes 3 default policies that administrators can choose to enable. User Risk Policy. Azure AD Identity Protection can calculate what it believes is normal for a user's behavior and use that to base decisions for their risk. User risk is a calculation of probability that an identity has been compromised. Administrators can make a decision based on this risk score signal to enforce organizational requirements. Administrators can choose to block access, or allow access, but require a password change using Azure AD Self-Service Password Reset. If a risk is detected, users can do a self-service password reset to self-remediate and close the user risk event to prevent unnecessary noise for administrators. Sign-in risk policy. Azure AD Identity Protection analyzes signals from each sign-in, both real-time and offline, and calculates a risk score based on the probability that the sign-in wasn't performed by the user. Administrators can make a decision based on this risk score signal to enforce organizational requirements. Administrators can choose to block access, or allow access but require multi-factor authentication. If a risk is detected, users can complete multi-factor authentication to self-remediate and close the risky sign-in event to prevent unnecessary noise for administrators. Azure AD Multi-Factor Authentication Registration Policy. Azure AD Identity Protection can help organizations roll out Azure AD Multi-Factor Authentication, MFA, using a conditional access policy requiring registration at sign-in. Enabling this policy is a great way to ensure new users in your organization have registered for MFA on their first day. MFA is one of the self-remediation methods for risk events within identity protection. Self-remediation allows your users to take action on their own to reduce helpdesk call volume. All 3 policies are turned off by default. To turn on each policy required by your organization, complete the following steps. 1. Sign into the Microsoft 365 Admin Center with a Global Administrator account. 2. In the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, in the left-hand navigation pane, select Show All. 3. In the left-hand navigation pane, under Admin Centers, select Azure Active Directory. For in the Azure Active Directory Admin Center, in the left-hand navigation pane, select All Services. 5. On the All Services page, select Identity. 6. In the Identity pane, select Azure AD Identity Protection. 7. On the Identity Protection Overview page, the three policies are listed in the middle pane under the Protect group. Select each of the three policies that your organization wants to enforce, and on its policy page, toggle the Enforce Policy switch to On. Explore the vulnerabilities and risk events detected by AIP. A vulnerability is a weakness that can be exploited by an attacker to do unauthorized actions within a computer system. Recommended solutions enable organizations to address these vulnerabilities to improve their security posture and prevent attackers from exploiting them. The following sections provide an overview of the vulnerabilities reported by Azure Identity Protection, along with recommendations on how to address those issues. Multi-factor authentication registration not configured. This vulnerability can affect the deployment of Azure AD Multi-Factor Authentication (MFA) in your organization. MFA provides a second layer of security to user authentication. It helps safeguard access to data and applications while meeting user demand for a simple sign-in process. MFA delivers strong authentication through a range of easy verification options, such as phone call, text message, mobile app notification, verification code, and third-party OATH tokens. Recommended action: it's recommended that you require Azure AD multi-factor authentication for user sign-in attempts. MFA plays a key role in risk-based conditional access policies available through Azure Identity Protection. Unmanaged cloud apps. This vulnerability helps you identify unmanaged cloud apps in your organization. In modern enterprises, IT departments are often unaware of all the cloud applications that users in their organization are using to do their work. It's easy to see why administrators have concerns about unauthorized access to corporate data, possible data leakage, and other security risks. Recommended action: it's recommended that you deploy Cloud App Discovery to discover unmanaged cloud applications. Once you've identified these unmanaged cloud apps, it's recommended that you manage them using Azure Active Directory. Security alerts from Privileged Identity Management. This vulnerability helps you discover and resolve alerts about privileged identities in your organization. To enable users to carry out privileged operations, organizations need to grant users temporary or permanent privileged access in Azure AD, Azure or Office 365 resources, or other SaaS apps. Each of these privileged users increases the attack surface of your organization. This vulnerability helps you identify users with unnecessary privileged access and take appropriate action to reduce or eliminate the risk they pose. Recommended action: Microsoft recommends that your organization use Azure AD Privileged Identity Management to manage, control, and monitor privileged identities. Use PIM to manage access of these identities to resources in Azure AD and other Microsoft online services, such as Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Intune. Azure Active Directory Risk Events. Most security breaches occur when attackers gain access to an environment by stealing a user's identity. Discovering compromised identities is no easy task. Azure Active Directory uses adaptive machine learning algorithms and heuristics to detect suspicious actions that are related to an organization's user accounts. Each detected suspicious action is stored in a record called a risk event. Currently, Azure Active Directory detects 6 types of risk events. Users with leaked credentials. Sign-in attempts from anonymous IP addresses. Impossible travel to atypical locations. Sign-in attempts from infected devices. Sign-in attempts from IP addresses with suspicious activity. Sign-in attempts from unfamiliar locations. The parameters that define each risk event type are outlined in the following table. Detection type and reporting latency. Real-time: 5 to 10 minutes. Offline: 2 to 4 hours. Risk level and description. High confidence and high severity risk events. These events are strong indicators that the user's identity has been compromised and any affected user accounts should be remediated. Medium: high severity and lower confidence risk event, or low severity and high confidence risk event. These events are potentially risky, and any affected user accounts should be remediated. Low confidence and low severity risk event. This event may not require an immediate action, but when combined with other risk events, may provide a strong indication that the identity is compromised. Note: the insight you get for a detected risk event is tied to your Azure AD subscription. With the Azure AD Premium P2 edition, you get the most detailed information about all underlying detections. With the Azure AD Premium P1 edition, detections that aren't covered by your license appear as the following risk event: sign in with additional risk detected. The risk event type is an identifier for the suspicious action a risk event record has been created for. The following sections introduce each of the risk event types currently being tracked in Azure Active Directory. Users with leaked credentials. Cybercriminals often share credentials when they compromise valid passwords of legitimate users. Criminals share credentials by posting them publicly on the dark web or paste sites, or by trading or selling the credentials on the black market. The Microsoft Leaked Credentials service acquires username/password pairs by monitoring public and dark websites and by working with researchers, law enforcement, security teams at Microsoft, other trusted sources. When the service acquires username-password pairs, they're checked against the Azure AD user's current credentials. If a match is found, it means that a user's password has been compromised and a leaked credentials risk event is created. Sign-ins from anonymous IP address. This risk event type identifies users who have successfully signed in from an IP address that has been identified as an anonymous proxy IP address. These proxies are used by people who want to hide their device's IP address and may be used for malicious intent. Impossible travel to atypical locations. This risk event type identifies two sign-in attempts that originate from geographically distant locations, where at least one of the locations may also be atypical for the user, given past behavior. Among several other factors, this machine learning algorithm considers the time between the two sign-in attempts and the time it would have taken for the user to travel from the first location to the second, indicating that a different user is using the same credentials. The algorithm ignores obvious false positives contributing to the impossible travel conditions, such as VPNs and locations regularly used by other users in the organization. The system has an initial learning period of 14 days during which it learns a new user's sign-in behavior. Sign-in from unfamiliar locations. This risk event type considers past sign-in locations, IP, latitude/longitude, and ASN, to determine new or unfamiliar locations. The system stores information about previous locations from which a user has signed in and considers these familiar locations. The risk event is triggered when the sign-in occurs from a location that's not already in the list of familiar locations. The system has an initial learning period of 30 days. During this time, the system doesn't flag any new locations as unfamiliar locations. The system also ignores sign-in attempts from familiar devices and locations that are geographically close to a familiar location. Azure Identity Protection also detects sign-in attempts from unfamiliar locations for basic authentication/legacy protocols. Because these protocols don't have modern familiar features such as client ID, there aren't enough measurements to reduce false positives. To reduce the number of detected risk events, you should move to modern authentication. Sign-in attempts from infected devices. This risk event type identifies sign-in attempts from devices infected with malware that are known to actively communicate with a bot server. This event is determined by correlating IP addresses of the user's device against IP addresses that were in contact with a bot server. Sign-in attempts from IP addresses with suspicious activity. This risk event type identifies IP addresses from which a high number of failed sign-in attempts were seen across multiple user accounts over a short period of time. This match of traffic patterns of IP addresses used by attackers strongly indicates that accounts are either already compromised or are about to be compromised. This machine learning algorithm ignores obvious false positives, such as IP addresses that are regularly used by other users in the organization. The system has an initial learning period of 14 days where it learns the sign-in behavior of a new user and new tenant. Plan your identity investigation. Your journey through identity protection typically starts with the Azure AD Identity Protection Dashboard. The dashboard provides access to reports such as users flagged for risk events, and vulnerabilities. Settings such as the configuration of your security policies, notifications, and multi-factor authentication registration. The dashboard is typically your starting point for an investigation, which is the process of reviewing the activities, logs, and other relevant information related to a risk event to decide whether remediation or mitigation steps are necessary, and to understand how the identity was compromised and used. Mitigation sign-in risk events. A sign-in risk level is an indication, high, medium, or low, of the likelihood that a sign-in attempt was not performed by the legitimate owner of a user account. A mitigation is an action to limit the ability of an attacker to exploit a compromised identity or device without restoring the identity or device to a safe state. A mitigation doesn't resolve previous sign-in risk events associated with the identity or device. To mitigate risky sign-in attempts automatically, you can configure sign-in risk security policies. Using these policies, you consider the risk level of the user, or the sign-in to block risky sign-in attempts or require the user to do multi-factor authentication. These actions may prevent an attacker from exploiting a stolen identity to cause damage. They may also give you some time to secure the identity. Mitigation best practices. Choosing a high threshold reduces the number of times a policy is triggered and minimizes the impact to users. However, it also excludes low and medium sign-ins flagged for risk from the policy, which may not block an attacker from exploiting a compromised identity. Best practices to follow when setting a policy include: exclude users who do not/cannot have multi-factor authentication. Exclude users in locales where enabling the policy isn't practical, such as locales with no access to a help desk. Exclude users who are likely to generate numerous false positives, such as developers and security analysts. Use a high threshold during initial policy rollout, or if you must minimize challenges seen by end users. Use a low threshold if your organization requires greater security. Selecting a low threshold introduces other users' sign-in challenges but increased security. To strike a balance between usability and security, the recommended default for most organizations is to configure a rule for a medium threshold. The sign-in risk policy is applied to all browser traffic and sign-ins using modern authentication. Not applied to applications using older security protocols by disabling the WS Trust endpoint at the federated IDP, such as ADFS. User risk. All active risk events that were detected by Azure Active Directory for a user contribute to a logical concept called user risk. A user flagged for risk is an indicator of a user account that might have been compromised. Additional reading. For more information, see Azure Active Directory Identity Protection. A user risk level is an indication, high, medium, or low, of the likelihood that the user's identity has been compromised. It's calculated based on the user risk events that are associated with a user's identity. The status of a risk event is either active or closed. Only risk events that are active contribute to the user risk level calculation. The user risk level is calculated using the following inputs: active risk events impacting the user, risk level of these events, remediation actions have been taken. You can use the user risk levels to create conditional access policies that block risky users from signing in or force them to securely change their password. Closing risk events manually. Organizations usually take remediation actions, such as a secure password reset, to automatically close risk events. However, remediation actions may not always be possible, such as when a user with active risk events has been deleted. An investigation reveals that a reported risk event has been performed by the legitimate user. Because risk events that are active contribute to the user risk calculation, you may have to manually lower a risk level by closing risk events manually. During an investigation, you can choose to take one of the following actions to change the status of a risk event. Resolve. If you took an appropriate remediation action outside Azure Identity Protection after investigating a risk event and you believe the risk event should be considered closed, mark the event as resolved. Resolved events will set the risk event's status to closed and the risk event will no longer contribute to user risk. Mark as false positive. In some cases, you may investigate a risk event and discover that it was incorrectly flagged as a risk. You can help reduce the number of such occurrences by marking the risk event as false positive. Identifying risk events as false positive helps the machine learning algorithms to improve the classification of similar events in the future. The status of false positive events is changed to closed, and they'll no longer contribute to user risk. Ignore. If you haven't taken any remediation action, but you want the risk event to be removed from the active list, you can mark a risk event ignore, and the event status will be automatically changed to closed. Because ignored events don't contribute to user risk, they should only be used under unusual circumstances. Reactivate. Risk events that were manually closed by choosing resolve, false positive, or ignore can be reactivated by setting the event status back to active. Reactivated risk events contribute to the user risk level calculation. Risk events closed through remediation, such as a secure password reset, cannot be reactivated. Remediating user risk events. A remediation is an action to secure an identity or a device that was previously suspected or known to be compromised. A remediation action restores the identity or device to a safe state, and it resolves previous risk events associated with the identity or device. To remediate user risk events, you can complete a secure password reset to remediate user risk events manually. Configure a user risk security policy to mitigate or remediate user risk events automatically. Reimage the infected device. Azure Identity Protection Notifications. Azure Identity Protection sends two types of automated notification emails to help you manage user risk and risk events. Users at Risk Detected Email. Weekly Digest Email. In response to a detected account at risk, AIP generates an email alert with users at risk detected as the email subject. The email includes a link to the users flagged for risk report. As a best practice, you should immediately investigate the users at risk. Azure Active Directory Identity Protection Playbook. The playbook helps you understand how Azure Identity Protection works and simulates risk events and vulnerabilities. You can also set up risk-based conditional access policies and test the impact of these policies. Additional reading. For more information, see Azure Active Directory Identity Protection Playbook. Summary. Microsoft has secured cloud-based identities for more than a decade. By implementing Azure Active Directory Identity Protection, otherwise known as Azure Identity Protection, AIP, you learned that organizations can use the same protection systems Microsoft uses to secure identities. You learned in this module that most security breaches take place when attackers gain access to an environment by stealing a user's identity. Attackers have become increasingly effective in using third-party breaches and sophisticated phishing attacks. As soon as attackers gain access to even low-privileged user accounts, it's relatively easy for them to gain access to important company resources through lateral movement. Discovering compromised identities is no easy task. This module explored how Azure Active Directory uses adaptive machine learning algorithms and heuristics to detect anomalies and suspicious incidents that indicate potentially compromised identities. Azure Identity Protection uses this data to generate reports and alerts that enable you to evaluate the detected issues and take appropriate mitigation or remediation actions. You learned in this module how to enable Azure Identity Protection and how it identifies vulnerabilities and risk events. You also learned that organizations should plan their investigation in protecting cloud-based identities and how to protect their Azure Active Directory environment from security breaches.